And if you mute the speech that shakes your the stream in the direction clout and credit steers, directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears, directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers, and then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers, half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the Basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere, where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere. Of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead, where the thin blue line meets razor's edge, and where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs, all laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer, Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
That's how it goes. We won't open our eyes, so we're the last ones to know. We're the last ones alive. Kept our enemies close. Wondered why we don't thrive while we're grasping at ghosts. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5.
Count back from 5. The theater on fire, the cast on strike. The studio stuck starts taking a dive. The contract's tossed and they're gone with the tide. And the heads and execs, their hands are tied. We can't pump this dreck and treat you right. But what do you expect from the industry type who survive by the leeching of bodies and minds? From those who original thoughts never seem to find. So they're gonna reboot ALF before your wages rise. And it gives cause to pause and reflect on the times. If they're losing control of their fools and their mimes, when all those obedient actors who grew their careers by averting their eyes are now holding the line. along with the authors of countless scripts that strengthen the hand of that corporate grip, squeezing our throats till we take the pen and we accept and consent to the corporate drip. Till you're all up to date on your pharma du jour, till you got a healthy support for the war on your lips. And now you know that the advertisers need more than a rerun summer full of flashback clips. Enter the scans from the year before, all the days of de-aging and mapping the face, and the hours of actors recording their voices are links in the chains that will bind them in place. Now all of those shows are so easy to make. When they got a drone they control that needs no break, it can bend, it can break, and it's cheaply replaced enough up-to-date films all in one take. And those studios bank on us doing our duty, unhinging our jaws and digesting the fakes. Because they know that we'll love how synthetic it tastes. Watch as they edit your features without any trace. Not that there's anything you could do anyway. Now watch as they show you a movie you saying shit you would never say. Dystopia boldly accelerates. Maybe you're only a mold, something to fill with a clone, something that Elon would celebrate. Something they own, something they program and code, something that's woefully able to know its exanimate. Cause it doesn't feel touch over top of the laminate. You will not feel an emotion, but they will not scan and examine it. You and the other consumer contaminants fed on the federal diet of Kiev, Havana, and Tiananmen. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment.
Where did you think we'd go? Love, there's nowhere to lie. Guess it's not who you know, more it's what you can hide.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Have peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.
We did it. Collin, it's another week of this hellhole we call Earth. We're going to talk about it. Sign the news. Reef Breland. With me as always, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear. Care Bear, how are you doing? You doing okay?
Good. You're kind of cutting out a little bit, by the way.
That's weird. We'll see
it's
if
fine, but yeah, I think you need to speak into the mic.
Yeah, we'll make sure that happens. Anyway, how's DC? Everything good?
Yeah, DC's fine. Yeah, looks like my glass is a little crooked or whatever, but yeah, DC's fine. It's spring. It finally feels like spring.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
pretty soon it'll be like scorching hot, but I think I'd rather prefer that compared to the winter that we've had, and I don't have like a $400 dollar electric bill for 750 square foot basement apartment. So
ridiculous.
Yes.
Like that's
Shout
just your heating. That's just your well, that's your like heating pretty much. Like
Heat and electric. No,
Yeah.
heat and electric. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're on gas, I think,
Yeah, that
right?
was the bill a couple months ago. Fortunately, since it's been warm, I haven't had to have the heat on. So
Yeah.
so hopefully that should go way down this month. But yeah, that was the thing
Oh,
that I had to worry about a couple months ago. But I digress. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm sore and tired, but otherwise, doing it up. We brought some stories.
So yeah, we were off. So yes, we were off. I think we mentioned that 2 weeks ago, but I don't think we announced it. But we were off last week. We took a mental health day
Yep.
of sorts. We need to do that every once in a while, just giving the news, and we need breaks every now and then. So last week was good that we didn't have to worry about, at least reporting on news for last week, but we're back at it. Happy April Fools to everybody, by the way.
Yep.
So I'm going to report on, and I didn't think I was going to do this again because there was another No Kings rally over the weekend. However, I did find on Instagram, I think he's an activist based in Minneapolis. I think we've mentioned him before. I don't remember, but his name sounds familiar. He gave a critique on the rallies, which I think is very spot on, especially since not a lot, but I think a few liberals, especially like a few of my friends or acquaintances who would normally have gone to this, are now kind of questioning these rallies a little bit. So I think, I think people are kind of figuring out the math ain't mathing necessarily on the rallies, although small, but I think a lot more people now are beginning to notice how ineffective they are. And really, it just amounts to you screaming into the void, essentially, is what it amounts to, which don't mind that per se. We need that catharsis. But if we're looking for action and if we're looking for change, this isn't the way to go about it. And I think his name, the guy who wrote the article based that we found is Michael Lee Vicker. I think that's how you say his last name. I apologize if I butchered it. Gives a critique on the rallies. So I'm going to report on that first. And then later on tonight, this story kind of popped off last Wednesday. So I would have reported on it anyway. So I would have had it for this week.
Yeah.
So Ghana went to the UN to make their case for reparations regarding the Atlantic slave trade. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how some Black Americans are in their fifis about it. And not to say that I particularly like talking about them, but I do enjoy kind of kicking them in the teeth every once in a while because they're showing themselves to be as ignorant as all is ever hell. But we'll get into that a little later. And what did you bring tonight?
Well, I brought a story, really a follow-up story to something we covered a couple of months ago, where we talked about on the channel, if you look up death penalty with Ben Gavir's face on it, we talked about the introduction of this bill into the Knesset, where they're legalizing execution of Palestinian prisoners under the guise of a death penalty.
Right.
So we're going to talk about that and the despicable nonsense that's brought about. And I brought this story that me and you both apparently had saved, about like Jews' role in Zionism and how they should be combating it. So I figured it was a good retrospective in general to kind of end us out tonight.
It was a long article though, from what you just reading through it. So
but should be good. The rest of this is pretty short this evening, so I figured we had a little time to go through some stuff. But
Not sure
anyway,
about my second story, but we'll see. But anyway, pretty much everyone who's here is not new. So welcome, guys. Glad you're here with us. So as you know, YouTube has remonetized us, but they take 30% of your money. So for every dollar that you give, they'll take 30 cents. So, and given how gas is now, at least for me, over $4 a gallon, and I'm sure that's going to get a lot worse within the next month, and more. We want you to save your monies. So if you want to support us, especially to help us pay for the programming that we use in order to produce these shows, not just this show, but all the shows on the network, as well as possibly help our colleagues in the network with some tech equipment. If we get any extra, we probably want to give, to Mutual Aid or something like that. We're not that place yet, but hopefully one day we'll be able to do that. You can scan the QR code you see on your screen, or you could type in the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen there. Or if you're in the YouTube chat and live, you can type in !donate, and the Ko-fi link will pop up, and you can give as little as $1, pretty much anything you want. So that's one of the best ways, in addition to Cash App, PayPal, Substack, and Patreon, if you want to support us, especially monthly. As we say, take care of yourselves, neighbors, families. Do what you need to in order to ensure you're keeping afloat, especially in these hard times. We know that, especially right now, times are hard, especially given gas prices, and I'm sure food is going to follow suit pretty soon. So please make sure you're taking care of yourselves financially. That being said, if you do have any extra money to give to support us in any way, shape, or form, we really appreciate it. Anyone who gives at any point will make it to our Wall of Fame. Anyone who's been extra generous, their names are highlighted here, as well as your names will be featured in our closing credits. Hopefully, Reef, you updated that.
I might have, I might not have. We'll see at the end of the show.
No. That's a no.
No, it's not a no. It's a maybe.
That's a no.
It's a maybe.
You think I'm a teacher, I know like tricks of what kids say. But either way, we thank you for your support. And even if you can't give us financially, the easiest and the free way, like, share, and subscribe. You guys have been killing it with sharing our content and increasing our view count on YouTube, which has helped our subscriber base go up, as well as our view count go up. So that will help the algorithm to recognize we actually do good work. So they will push us a little more, slightly more. So yeah, thank you guys for that. And we love you. So shall we get started?
Yes, sir.
All right. So first story tonight, as I said earlier, I didn't think I was going to talk about this again, but I think it's necessary in some ways, given the discourse that was had online regarding this, especially the No Kings rallies, especially given, I think some people now, especially some who are more centrist, are beginning to kind of question these rallies and what they're for.
Right.
I mean, we talked about it the last time at length. However, on Instagram over the weekend, I happened to come across, I wouldn't say an article, but slides that were written by, I believe, an activist based in Minneapolis, Michael Lee Vikra, who gives a critique on the rallies, which I thought was very spot on. So we're going to go through that. But before we do, I'm sure a lot of you kind of know the details, but for those of you who don't, or those of you who might watch this as a segment, Common Dreams reported, well, several publications, but I pulled this from Common Dreams. This written by Brad Reed, who writes, No Kings, 8 million rally against Trump. in largest single-day protests in U.S. history. In San Francisco, thousands of anti-Trump activists gathered on a local beach to form a human sign that read, "Trump must go now, no ICE, no war, no lies, no kings." So Brad continues, millions of Americans across all 50 states on Saturday rallied against President Donald Trump and his authoritarian agenda during nationwide No Kings protests. The flagship No Kings rally in St. Paul, Minnesota, which organizers Indivisible estimated drew over 200,000 demonstrators, featured speeches from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, Representative Ilhan Omar, and actress Jane Fonda, as well as a special performance from rock icon Bruce Springsteen, who performed Streets of Minneapolis, a song he wrote in tribute of slain protesters Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Organizers called it the largest single-day nationwide demonstrations in U.S. history, with an estimated 8 million people coming out for events in communities and cities nationwide. From major cities to rural towns that have never seen mobilizations like this before, protesters made clear that in America, we don't do kings, the No Kings Coalition said in a statement. This is what it looks like when a movement grows, not just in size, but in reach, in courage, and in more people who see themselves as part of this movement, the organizers said. The American people are fed up with this administration's power grabs and the illegal war that Congress and the public haven't approved, and the continued attempts to stifle our freedoms. We're not waiting for change, we are making it. The rally in Minneapolis was one of more than 3,300 No Kings events across the U.S. and internationally. An aerial video footage showed massive crowds gathered for demonstrations in the city, including my city of Washington, D.C., New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and San Diego.
This 8 million, me and Indy were talking about it when this number came out, because we remembered the last No Kings protest where they said 12 million people showed up and it was the biggest protest. Now it's right. 10 or 8. Like we're losing some folks. We're losing a couple of million folks allegedly, but we're still somehow the biggest event ever. The math don't math, you know?
The math don't math, but we'll get into this more in a minute. But I think, again, like there's probably other reasons why, assuming these numbers are correct, which you never know really these things, but
right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if there were less people coming, given just the discourse online, a lot of people, and I'm odd that a lot of people said, well, where are the demands? Like, what is the actions being taken in terms of this? Like, it's, as I said earlier, it's just a way for, and as I said before, it's just a way for people to scream and yell and fuss about Trump and go home. Like, you can do that online. You don't necessarily, now, again, if you felt compelled to do it, it's a free country. We can't stop you. But again, if you're looking to make change, this isn't a way to do it. And I find it kind of ironic because, one of the big stories last week while we were away, obviously, was TSA and how they weren't getting paid. I think now they're getting paid. Yeah. But last week they weren't. They had gone without pay for about, I think, close to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And, and the argument that people were making were, oh, well, Republicans are bypassing the lines that the rest of us poors had to stand in for like over 3 hours or more just to pass security, in order to get on their vacations. They're on vacation right now. But Democrats were also using those same like perks in order to leave Washington, D.C. And like I saw a couple of them literally kind of hiding their faces, to try and avoid the press, taking pictures of them or talking to them, knowing that they're bypassing the very lines that they claim they care about Americans being in. And there was, a picture of Bernie, singing First Class, that people were like, oh, like Republicans were like, oh, well, Bernie, like he claims, he's against the millionaires, but yet he's sitting in first class. And like, I'm like, and people were making the point like he probably has enough points where he got upgraded given his position. Fine, that happens. But my concern, and that's what I was saying to folks online, was how did he get on that plane? Did he bypass the lines like everyone else, or did he stand in line? I would think probably the former. And yet he was at Minnesota saying Trump bad. Trump wasn't paying these workers when Bernie was taking advantage, more likely, of the very thing that he claims to be fighting against. So it's not just synonymous with Trump, although Trump obviously is the biggest culprit right now. It's all of them. So if you were going to do this, you really should be calling out everyone in government, because they act like kings in their own way. So, so I didn't see anyone necessarily having that conversation per se online, but it's not just limited to Trump in terms of how he's acting. It's basically the whole of government on both sides that have taken advantage of this system that they're in some way, shape, or form to enrich and empower themselves to do the shit that they're doing now at our expense. But anyway, I digress. However, No Kings rallies weren't just held in major U.S. cities. In a series of social media posts, Indivisible co-founder Leah Greenberg collected photos and videos of No Kings events in communities including Arvada, Colorado, Mason, New Jersey, and St. Augustine, Florida, as well as international No Kings events held in London and Madrid. Attendance estimates for Saturday's No Kings protest were not available as of this writing. Polling analysis Jean Nelson Mars estimated that the previous No Kings event held in October drew at least 5 million nationwide, making it likely the largest single political protest ever, which kind of goes against what you were saying that there were
right, which I know I've seen 12 million called. Like I could literally go find the link. Like I know Indy talked about this as well when he talked about this. But
yeah. But anyway, so as I said, I found this I wouldn't say article, there were slides, but they were posted on Instagram over the weekend. And it was written by Michael Lee Viker. I think that's how you say his name. I apologize if I got your last name wrong. I thought it was very interesting in terms of, because I believe he is an activist in Minneapolis, which was where the flagship rally was, obviously. So I saw even on his page, there were a lot of people, and as he said, please read to the last slide, which a lot of people didn't, and they had told him everything and had all the criticism of him in terms of what he was saying, because basically people like, well, it's good for people to get out, and Michael said, did you read the whole thing? Which many people did not. So we are going to read the whole thing, and we're going to comment on it. But this is what he said in preparation for what he posted. I have some very strong and maybe unpopular opinions about No Kings. I'm not ready to say it does more harm than good. I'm not ready to say it does nothing, but I am prepared to say it has not moved the needle and is, whether its founders know it or not designed to. Read all slides to the last before commenting. If you feel like unfollowing me, let's debate in the comments instead. Echo chambers won't save us any more than parades. So these were the slides that started it. How No Kings marches undermine grassroots organizing, anti-authoritarian power, and real radical change, and what you can do. So he writes, demanding No Kings not only demands to get rid of a thing we already don't have, it does so because if we were to correctly assess that we have a dictator who has captured the state, then the movement would require a demolition of the neoliberal frameworks which not only greased the rails for state capture, but made that state infinitely more dangerous, violent, and made dictatorship a logical, almost inevitable, outcome of a two-party system moving increasingly right as each party is beholden to capital, carcerarity, imperialism, and militarism, thus creating the conditions for democracy's collapse. So in other words, you can't blame what's happening on Trump alone without critiquing the Democrats as well and their complicity in how we got to this place right now. So, which again is kind of what we've been saying forever on this show and on the network.
Mm-hmm.
But we only have less than 3,000 views, so people don't necessarily listen to us or care what we have to say. But regardless, one, no kings obscures the political reality we are actually facing in service of saving the political and economic frameworks and elites responsible for it. We don't have a king. We have an accelerating of autocracy brought to us by neoliberal capitalism and American imperialism. So this is a chart that he posted. King/monarchies. Monarchies are hereditary systems that can be prone to despotism, but not inherently so. Constitutional monarchies. Monarchical states are most often ancillary in service to the king. States are built up around the monarchy. So in comparison to that, to dictators, autocracies, they are inherently despotic. Pre-existing state structures are captured and kneaded against the people in order to concentrate power and monopoly on violence. Pre-existing liberal democratic states set the terms for their own co-option through its strengthening/religion of the state. So making the comparison of what monarchies are to what I would argue we're pretty much there.
Yeah.
In terms of an autocracy right now.
Which, oligarchy, whatever you want to call it. There are multiple ways to describe the top-down structure,
Right.
But
graphics such as No King since 1776 that you see on the left push the narrative forward that the nation is the antidote to tyranny, that the founding fathers got it right. We just have to follow the wisdom of slave owners. It asserts Trump is alien to the system or an anomaly, not a predictable product of it. Indeed, not the nation manifest in flesh. A movement peddling nationalist creation myths cannot save us. The Revolutionary War was largely fought because King George forbade Western expansion beyond the Appalachian Mountains with the Proclamation Line of 1763. Colonialists were incensed the king dare restrict further colonization. The problem is the founding. It is the founding fathers, it is the slaveocracy and genocide of indigenous peoples and their mass ethnic cleansing. A movement powered by the same national myths which brought us an authoritarianism does not want revolutionary change. It wants to turn back the clock to decorum and a more palatable, liberal monopoly on violence. So I thought it was very interesting what he said in bold that essentially manifest destiny right here. Like the idea and, the idea was like, how dare you say that we cannot colonize, take over the very land that we are claiming as our own.
right.
Like, this is the enlightenment, folks. Like, it was the idea of like being closer to God when ironically I would argue like, the white supremacists of the day became more of the savages than the savages that they claimed were already here, funny enough. And we're seeing that being perpetuated now, more so now, especially what's happening in Israel at the moment. But I think that's something we don't often talk about because I think at least we talked about how U.S. history, AP U.S. history often undermines like the reality. It kind of romanticizes a lot of this stuff in terms of, the colonialists were seemingly good and were looking for religious freedom and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Like, keep in mind,
he didn't even talk about that they're colonialists practically, other than they live in colonies. You know,
Right.
like that's
But
about
what
it.
is not right? But what is not mentioned in like I thought about this today on the way home because there were Puritan like back in the day that actually
Some of
came
them,
over here. Some
sure.
of them, but they were essentially the freaks. They were the nut jobs, like within Europe, that were
Yep.
looking to escape. Like we don't talk about it in those terms. You can kind of make it the equivalent of maybe certain evangelical groups today that are kind of like nuts, like kind of the similar thing back then in
Yeah.
terms of how this country came to be. You know, they were the nuts of their day. But again, you see the idea of manifest destiny, you know, that King George forbade them to go past the Appalachians. They wanted to keep within the territory, you know, back
Right.
then, you know,
Yeah.
of the original 13 colonies, and people were like, hell no, we're expanding. You know, we're going to take this land for our own. So, yeah, so it was basically the idea of imperialism and colonialism that we're seeing, which is not talked about that way.
No.
So,
Well, and back then it would have been individualistic too. I mean, they
right.
pushed the
Well,
individual homesteader into those
think,
areas.
I think, therefore I am.
Right.
Isn't that the phrase of the Enlightenment?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's kind of how all of this.
Descartes.
Kind of yes.
Descartes. So, even though that's not how you say
right.
it, you ignorant motherfuckers. Ignorant. Like, I did, dude. Someone literally told me that at a bar one time. Descartes. I mean, like, Descartes? Sure. French? Yeah. Don't worry. They also called Lafayette County Lafayette County. I don't want to talk about it. They didn't know shit. But no one knows shit because they all call it Lafayette County. It's in Florida.
Okay.
It is technically how you were supposed to say it, but I'm like, y'all should at least know your American history. You know, like Lafayette is a kind of a big deal, you know? So, and he'd be incredibly insulted you called him Lafayette of all things. Somehow like the most redneck way to pronounce it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, as you were saying.
All right. So going back to Michael's slides, number 2, by focusing on the king figure, the marches can express displeasure with the present without challenging the conditions/structures which produce Trump or offer means of escaping this regime and the many actors responsible, from Republican think tanks to Democratic-controlled opposition. So if you look at a chart on the left, No King's March, operates within liberal capitalist frameworks, only takes place on the weekends, sanctioned by permits/police, constricts organizing power to nonprofits, locking movements within an existing system of funders/donors and acceptable resistance.
Yep.
Demands that those in power acquiesce willingly, which we know will never happen. Versus what we see now. Look, he's based in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So I want to be very fair with what he says here. I don't necessarily think this is
I think this march also.
I think this might be the ideal.
Right.
But whether or not this has been put in practice, you can make the argument either or, I think. But again, I'm saying this just from the outside. I don't exactly know. I mean, we've had Pasta on kind of talking about this a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, but people in Minneapolis will know better if this is actually happening. I can't necessarily speak to that, being that I'm not there, and we don't hear much stuff from there. That being said, Minneapolis Ice Out March and General Strike threatens Capitol, operates outside of acceptable timeframes of resistance and bounds of power, decentralized, grassroots, coalitional, and responsive, shifts power to the people and creates conditions wherein power must acquiesce or lose the material conditions necessary for their power. In other words, tangibles. What are the tangibles? So again, we talk about that ad nauseum on this show. So Michael asks, what now? which is a question we ask all the time.
Yep.
All around the country, communities are engaging in mutual aid, underground organizing, open rebellion against ICE, against AI data centers, against DHS concentration camps, against U.S. military accelerationism. In crisis, we find ways to build power if we focus on systems and ways of which being aligned with a life-affirming future that is inherently, by its orientations, anti-fascist. Issues-based movements fail to scale because when an issue is resolved, the air and energy is let out. On Saturday, March 28th, millions of people will march. Many of them are not plugged into community. They don't know what else to do. If there is any silver lining to such a vapid campaign as No Kings, is that it's accessible because it does not challenge liberal capitalist democracy or American opulence. The best use of the march is if you are going to co-opt it. Get people's names, contacts, follow up with them, set a meeting, build additional power, get them plugged in ways that account for the fact some might be liabilities ideologically or by not knowing how to navigate power or organizing. If you don't go, invest in mutual aid, engage in practices towards building community sovereignty, strategize around destabilizing the streams of the regime's power. In Minneapolis, networks of care, revolt, community defense, and community sovereignty, which disrupt the regime and the state it has co-opted, are taking place. We need to build networks of such power daily, not just march quarterly on a weekend in hopes that the dictator steps down. Dictators don't step down from power. They are defeated by power. Mass expressions of displeasure do not remove our collective consent to be governed by a cudgel. They do not render us ungovernable. Until we are ungovernable, this is how we will be governed.
Yep.
I mean, cannot say it any better myself. But any thoughts on that before we conclude?
No, I mean, generally, like, I'm in agreement. I think some of the stuff is a little like, even then, like, he hasn't gone through those steps to like figure out if those are viable as well, you know?
Well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
I think in this case, it's maybe seeing what sticks, given what's happening in Minneapolis, just kind of seeing what works and what can be grown. But I think his idea is like, just do something, try something.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And see how that develops organically. But I think the point that he's trying to make is, as he said, to go and scream and have a cute sign and yell at Trump in the hope that he will do the right thing, or the hope that any one of these folks will do the right thing, is a useless exercise. Now,
which
as
it's
we
also
keep saying,
like, he hasn't added the fact that like going to these things in general can get you and, you know, immediately put on lists and facial recognition and all that stuff, like, you know, digital IDs attached to all that, like, you know, there's a lot of just going can put you in
or
a
just
bad
at
situation.
minimum, if you give your name on a mailing list, they will call you potentially to ask you for money for this organization or this politician to get Trump out. So
with the like terrorist rules the way they are now, you know, if you get labeled Antifa or anything close to that, you know, you could get thrown in jail. So, you know, there's definitely some consequences to these things, and like, is that worth it for this? You know, like that's part of it. You know, and I know your people especially in the last couple of like parades and protests are like, nah, y'all go. We've been doing it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like,
which in this case, I more than understand, but to sit on the couch doing nothing is not ideal either.
Which
So
it's hard to tell people too, because I do think there's a factor of like I don't think there's very many opportunities right now, and telling people to wait for those opportunities, like I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It comes out as like do nothing, which is not what we're saying, you know. So, but I don't know. That's just me.
But speaking of, if you go back in, because you brought
Yes, sir.
this, so at Think Peace Tribe said Kwame Ture would generally slap folks across the mouth for claiming these No Kings protests are good political strategy, which, right? And I'm not going to play the clip because I played it too many times here, but he's talked about this, the difference between organizing and mobilization, which is what No Kings are. Mobilization is just to gather people together, not to necessarily strategize as to take power from, from the establishment, which is what organizing is.
Right.
But then continues, he's one of many Black organizers that should be a guiding light for most people, but folks would rather listen to Hillary Clinton co-signing this protest. Instead, it's gross. Or Bernie, or AOC, or any one of these people.
Or Stephen Colbert, where they all pat themselves on the back and say, "Good job, we resisted." You know, and then they go home, do their tapioca pudding. Like, you know, so like anyway.
You had one more there, I think.
I brought this one. Tired peasant saying this won't stop fascism, making signs and whatnot. And Jason Kishinev, No Kings is a thinly disguised pep rally designed to get people fired up for vote for the Dems in November. Nothing more. And I just brought this meme because LeVar Burton's going to lay it down. No Kings? Nah, man. No capitalism. Oh, maybe we do that.
Capitalism.
But I love how we switch this to LeVar Burton because the Drake meme should be fucking dead. Leave the Drake meme at home. Fuck that guy. You know? LeVar Burton meme, new meme. Like, he definitely won't have any problems later that might come out. That would never happen. Not my reading Rainbow Man. You know?
Right.
You better not LeVar Burton.
Make LeVar Burton a thing. More of a thing than he is.
I want to be LeVar Burton.
Yeah, I think, again, didn't need to do it. I mean, our audience knows this very well. I think, again, this might be good for any newbies who might watch us, like, maybe as a segment or a clip, like, later on. But again, just the idea of like be very caught. I think the moral of the story is don't expect anything out of you attending like these things. But again, it's a free country. Do what you want. Just be aware of the risks you are taking in order to go to these events. But there's a lot better use of your time, especially if you think locally in terms of what you should be doing or could do. Again, to support your neighbors and just be aware of what's around you and supporting the people who you live in direct vicinity of. I think at minimum starting there, like checking on your neighbors, seeing if they're okay, seeing what their needs are, and talk to or push council people or whoever is in your town or city to make those necessary changes so that you and your neighbors feel a little bit more more in control of what's happening in your direct town and city. And I think at minimum starting there. Whatever that means, could be mutual aid, could be, volunteering or whatever, mutual aid, whatever you think you need or whatever your giftings are. I think at minimum just starting there and just kind of seeing what happens from there. But, but I think, again, the idea from all of this is how we're taking care of each other, not going and yelling like Trump bad and then going to your homes and then kind of twiddling your thumbs in the hope that he passes on, which I know a lot of people are hoping for, or just maybe in the hope that he actually gets his mind right and actually does something good for the benefit of the American people, which we know he's not going to, but none of them are going to. They have no reason to. So, as Michael said, which we agree here, the only way that things are going to change is if we take power from them. And that's only going to happen if they're scared of their position. So whatever that means or whatever we have to do in order to get them there, I would love to have that conversation. And let us know in the chat or let us know in the comments if you're watching this as a segment how you think we should scare our politicians who are supposed to be working for us in order to help them get their minds right. And talking about that in that way is why YouTube pushes down the algorithm. So if you want to support us, you can scan the QR code or you can go to the Ko-fi link to help us, support us financially. Or if you're not able to, it's more than okay. You can also give via Substack, PayPal, Cash App, or Patreon. If money is tight, and we understand that money might be tight for a lot of you right now, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share our content to help fight the suppression that we do see on YouTube, and help us get to free clay. I think we're about 110 or close to that away from that.
Yep.
So maybe by the end of the month we're able to get there by May, my birthday month. That'll be a nice birthday present if we get to free K by the beginning of May. So thank you for watching.
Mew. Accord Lord in the chat. YouTube don't want me to tell you what I think will scare them. That is part of the thing with we got to be careful with what we say on here, unfortunately. You know? Like,
yeah.
I mean, but Substack going, Rumble's going.
Old Man Barker in the chat saying hi to the fam and us.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Accord Lord community greater than politics. Yep. Yes.
Kame Shwari Kate said we weren't allowed to call out the Dem/DNC/AOC and all the other clowns because we were cautioned to not create a circular firing squad. Now we are in the direct crosshairs of the firing squad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, like, now those people are like partially. It to me is like shooting gallery stuff of they're just like birds on a fucking track. You know, they roll their stupid asses out occasionally into the media just so that you will take shots at them now. You know? Like, which is hard to explain to people because you're like, we got to clearly expose the liars. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how this works. You know? Like, but anyway, Kamishwari Kate, they are frightened of the masses, especially if those masses affect their pocketbook. You know?
Yep.
So,
yep.
Like, anyway, you ready to get to our next one? Ready.
Yeah, but, I mean, but this one is kind of
gonna suck. Like,
yeah,
your rage meter is gonna fucking blow a lid. So we talked about this not that long ago, Collin. We beat everyone to this reporting, and it went well underreported until now that the actual consequences are here, right? Like, not that we could have done much about it, but you know, at least we knew about it. So we talked about the bill that got introduced.
Who are these people?
Back a couple of months ago. Hey, Jack's Page giving us $5. Thank you so much. Way too generous, Jack's Page. But, so Dave DeCamp over at antiwar.com writes, Israeli Knesset passes death penalty bill for Palestinians. The bill mandates executions of people convicted of deadly acts of terrorism with the intent to deny the existence of the state of Israel. So
Now, keep in mind, this
Yes.
could be something as small as throwing a rock
yeah.
at an IDF soldier.
Yep.
But this is what counts as terrorism versus what we're seeing Israel do. So
Yep.
keep that in mind and keep that context as Reef is reading this.
And keep in mind how terrorist bills across the globe are changing their definitions, partially in line with this. So the Israeli Knesset passed a bill on Monday that mandates the death penalty for Palestinians convicted of deadly acts of terror, an effort that was led by Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. Leaders of the Jewish Power Party, who were seen celebrating with champagne after the vote, the bill is designed to apply exclusively to Palestinians by mandating the death penalty for a terrorist convicted of killing a person with the intent to deny the existence of the state of Israel. According to Haaretz, the law is now applicable in any territory that Israel effectively controls, which includes the occupied West Bank and more than 50% of the Gaza Strip, and I'm sure more to come. In his remarks on the vote, Ben-Gvir made clear that the bill was designed to execute only those convicted of killing Israeli Jews. The state of Israel is changing the rules of the game today. Whoever murders Jews will not continue to breathe and enjoy conditions in prison. This is a day for justice for the victims and a day of deterrence for our enemies. So I'm sure they'll just expand this law however they want, to include however many they want. That's how these things work, The bill was supported by 62 lawmakers in the Knesset, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. 48 Knesset members voted against the legislation, and 1 abstained. The Israeli rights group B'Tselem strongly condemned the bill. And noted the high conviction rate in Israeli military courts, where Palestinians who live in the West Bank are put on trial. The penalty, execution by hanging, must be carried out within 90 days of sentencing, with no possibility of pardon. The death penalty will be determined in military courts, where only Palestinians are tried, B'Tselem said. These courts have an approximately 96% conviction rate, based largely on confessions extracted under duress and torture during interrogations. The law allows military judges no discretion and requires them to sentence Palestinians convicted of murder to death, except in special circumstances, the right group added. The Palestinian Authority also strongly denounced the bill, with the Palestinian presidency saying that it amounts to war crimes against the Palestinian people and comes within the broader context of escalating Israeli policies and measures across the occupied Palestinian territories, including the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So I found this. It's from Anti-Zionist Movement Organization. Israel has passed a law that makes the execution of Palestinians taken hostage from the occupied West Bank the default sentence by hanging within 90 days. Palestinians of the West Bank are processed through military occupation. Again, 90%, 96% conviction rate. Jewish settlers who are illegal under international law are not subject to military courts. They fall under civilian law. The law will also apply in Israeli courts, but only to terrorist activities, including acts that undermine the existence of Israel. This means Jews will not be indicted under this law. So it's pretty much race-based from everyone that said this is race-based, policy. So I thought Israel didn't do that. I thought they didn't like discrimination like that. Under international law,
the idea that they call themselves the
only democracy
in the Middle East. So
under international law, Israel must have no presence in the occupied West Bank, let alone the right to legislate or execute Palestinians. The death penalty law is reportedly not applied retroactively, nor to alleged perpetrators of the October 7th crossing. A separate bill may be brought to a vote in the Knesset for existing hostages. Meanwhile, in Britain, the Terrorism Act is being used to arrest activists, criminalize solidarity, and silence the British public on behalf of the same lobby. The lobby driving execution in occupied Palestine is the same lobby eroding our rights here. Yep. Unfortunately. So, is this doing the thing? So, we covered this quite a long time ago. Feel free to go check out our coverage of when this was enacted, placed into the Knesset. We covered that. So go find this on the channel. But we talked about this lady, right? Limon Sonhar Malek, one of Israeli Knesset members who is sponsoring behind the bill. In her perception, only Palestinians are terrorists, so this bill is only exclusive to Palestinians. She said before, there is no such thing as a Jewish terrorist. So David Miller is sharing this out. So, yeah, not great. Marwa Osman, you cannot make this shit up, celebrating the passage of a law that sanctions the killing of illegally detained political prisoners. People who are native to the land, while you're passing that law, are a terrorist colonial settler. Now, Collin, back then, we didn't have video cameras documenting these kinds of things, right? But I just want you to go back to, I don't know, apartheid South Africa or Jim Crow South and imagining laws similarly involving hanging were passed, and then see if this celebration reminds you of those. So,
sure.
בעד חוק עונש מוות 62, 48 מתנגדים, נמנע אחד. אני קובעת כי הצעת חוק עונש מוות למחבלים תשפ"ו 2026 התקבלה בקריאה השנייה והשלישית, והחוק ייכנס לספר החוקים של מדינת ישראל. שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. עם ישראל חי! אני מזמינה את חבר הכנסת, אני רוצה גם להודות לכל השותפים, לך אדוני ראש הממשלה.
You notice, by the way, what they're wearing? Have you noticed the little pins there of fucking nooses? Disgusting. Actively popping champagne at the killing of other humans. Oh, there's old fucking Netanyahu.
אני יודעת מה זה דרש ממך. תודה רבה.
Like, I wish it got better. I wish this story got better. It does not. So during a protest outside the Knesset, which apparently there is actually happening, against the death penalty law for Palestinians, Israeli police used water cannons, injuring photojournalist Menahem Kahana. So, I mean, we've seen this kind of shit happen here. I mean, I'm surprised there's still Israelis that oppose this. You know? Like, I'm shocking they aren't all brainwashed at this point. So, but, soon we will count them one by one. Here's fucking Ben Gavir with his nonsense.
השר, על מה כל החגיגה?
מוות למחבלים, עבר היום חוק מוות למחבלים, היסטוריה, היסטוריה.
Soon, one by one, execute all of them. They poured murderers and burned cheers to the people of Israel. Jesus Christ, dude. They're just like fucking disgusting humans. Like I said, this whole fucking shit with the nooses, right? I know I pointed that out in the video. Here they are. Where do you buy these at? KKK Jewelers? Is that where you get them? Like where every clan begins with K? Clearly that's like where they had to have bought them from. Like literally he's got like drones and shit, a fucking gun, and like, I mean, I know there's photos of fucking white Americans doing very similar shit in the past, but this is 2026, right? You'd think we'd understand we think we'd understand the context, right? Like,
yes.
Like that to me says they know and they just don't give a fuck. They're like, fine. You know? So
yeah.
Ugh. Now that Israel,
especially since they've been getting away with
everything,
war crimes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're like, this is
emboldening them to go more. But I think also because I believe that they think that Trump is on borrowed time in as much they can use him right now and get away with a lot of this shit. So they're wrapping things up before, assuming he is able to leave power or something happens to him, that they won't be able to go full kamikaze as they have been.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is knowing that they're under somewhat borrowed time, that they have the best chance of doing what they need to do under Trump.
Yeah, it's fucking despicable. So now that Israel has codified into law the death penalty for Palestinian terrorists convicted in their kangaroo courts, remember, they call children terrorists daily to justify murdering them. There's no doubt this new law is just a means to kill more Palestinians and to do so using the veneer of legality. So, yeah, I mean, earlier today, IDF troops operating in southern Gaza identified a terrorist who crossed the yellow line and approached the troops. Girl, 3 years old. Like, just a reminder, apartheid South Africa also enforced the death penalty against black activists in the 1960s under the pretext of combating terrorism. So we're not even using new fucking, like, tactics. Eva Kareen Bartlett, friend of the show, these creatures are ghouls. They revel in murdering. If you are surprised by this, you haven't been paying attention. Ben Thompson, we have now reached the final stage of the Gaza genocide. Israel has passed a law permitting state-administered murder to Palestinians in their prisons, about half of whom have no charges. The final stage of extermination. Remember when we said this didn't apply to people already charged?
Yes.
Well, when half the people in your prison don't have convictions, now we can start pushing them through the courts, right? So, how many of those people are going to go right to the fucking gallows? Like, fucking disgusting. So, we've watched Palestinians dehumanized for decades, each stage so predictably met that the law applies to Palestinians and not Israelis should be enough to horrify even those still blind to Israeli apartheid, and yet it's entirely predictable. The world was quiet when Israel targeted children, starved an entire population, bombed all their hospitals and universities, raped their illegal detainees, murdered health workers in front of the world, to ignore all of it. There will be those who will always deny this is what it is, a genocide. The impetus on us is to act to prevent genocide whenever it occurs. Never again, in that pledge, the international political power elite has so comprehensively failed. So, astute followers of the show might recognize this. This is the 10 stages of genocide. Guess where from? The Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. So they know how this shit works, right? Differences between people are not respected. There's a division of us and them. Symbolism. This is a visual manifestation of the hatred, right? We attach labels to them. Discrimination. Then we dehumanize them, call them animals of Amalek, right? Organization. We organize. We make the IDF to carry out our fucking shit. Like, you know, I mean, we've went through all of these. Preparation, persecution. Now we're at extermination and have been there. So it pretty much follows the list. History is doomed to repeat itself. So Litora FYM, I'm posting an image from a movie so it won't be so intense, but this is what Israel approved yesterday. So I forget the name of this movie, but it is decent. Got Stephen Merchant in it, I think. I mean, when Hollywood matches fucking reality.
השר, ראיתי שהאיראנים אומרים שאתה מת. אני מת להוציא מחבלים להורג. עונש מוות למחבלים.
Him gleefully boasting about the gallows they've produced. Like I don't even have words. You know what I mean? Like, what can you say to that shit? Fucking gross. I mean, plenty of art around this week about it. So, but any thoughts you have? You know?
Yeah, it's just, again, it's surprising but not surprising that mainstream media has not reported on this. And I have heard like some of the mainstream independent quote unquote channels have reported on this a little bit. So, I mean, low bar to kind of talk about this, but there should be more out. I think it's shocking to me that there's no outrage over this, because we know that if it were on the shoe was on the other foot, you know, there'll be eternal damnation right now. You know, if God forbid anyone in the Arab world was doing something like this to Jews, or to Israelis rather. But the fact that, you know, they're able to get away with this with Palestinians, crickets. It's just disgusting. And like, and I'll talk about this more in like my next segment, but any Black person who claims to be like a fan of Israel or kind of an ally, or can kind of consider themselves like we should be working in solidarity with Israel, and especially with stuff like this, especially since this is not so far off with what we still experience in this country among Black people.
Yeah.
You know, you need to have your head examined, because this is exactly like what they do to us here. So the idea that they're getting away with this in Palestine, you know, I think is really sick. And more importantly, it just shows kind of how depraved, and you can't even blame like, oh, it's just the elite, or like how politicians say, oh, it's Netanyahu, like as if he's like the anomaly in this. No, it's baked in the culture.
Yeah, it's all
Like,
over the shit.
the overwhelming majority of Israelis want this and revel in it. So, you know, it's funny, like, I remember talking about having this conversation with my cousin, like, I think maybe over a year ago. And we were talking about, like, places that we haven't gone to, or, like in terms of the world or whatever. Like, we kind of both talked about, like, how he's been to LA. I haven't been to LA, though I might visit for a couple of days over the summer to see a friend. And we both kind of mentioned, you know, as far as LA, like, it's just a city that none of us are kind of like excited to visit. I think, and he kind of defined it clearly for me in terms of we wouldn't necessarily feel safe, like in a city like LA, you know, like I think obviously just kind of given like the fakeness of it, but in terms of just its history and then just the overall structure of it, it's not an appealing place to either one of us. Not again, no shade to anyone who lives there who loves it, but it's a place that I in particular am not like revving up or excited to see. But to kind of compare that to Israel, though, it's kind of like, why would I ever want to go there knowing, one, the potential of how it would be treated over there as a Black person, but then number two, more importantly, knowing what's going on the other side, of the walls where this is happening among Palestinians, when that could easily be me, even there, not probably over there, but like easily over here. Like, and the idea that, as Black people, we can't, or we choose to ignore the similarities of what they go through, I think is also kind of awful. Like, the fact that you can easily get noosed or lynched and have it be like just on a Tuesday without any justice at all, and not feel like a connection to that. Like, I think it's just totally sick.
Like, and sick isn't even strong enough a word,
No.
Like,
No.
I mean, these people are going to be like, remember those faces, man. Like, they're going to think they're safe in their old age. Like, this is disgusting shit. But, talking about this is why YouTube has shadow banned us to hell. And if you would like to support us outside of the YouTube system, you can go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network or scan that QR code on your screen. Leave us a few dollary dues. We always appreciate it. But, just do all the engagement stuff that supposedly helps the channel. Like, subscribe, share this video because it's not going to be seen unless you do, and leave a comment. Let us know how despicable this is. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Well, got that one in the books. Bad cookies in the chat. What absolute trash. Yep. And asked if they actually were popping champagne. Like, yeah, it's fucking, can't wait for the U.S. to adopt this as well, says the Accord Lord. Yep. Yeah, it just sucks. Like, this kind of stuff right here is why Iran is the good guy in this whole situation. Cookie says, and they are our greatest allies, Sean. These monsters are the ones we simply can't let go. Sean, the Accord Lord, if you told me 5 years ago this is what would be happening, I would have laughed you out the fucking room. And now we're here. So, but fuck Israel all around. Anyway. Yeah, you're right, Collin. Israel wouldn't let you over there, and if you ever managed to get in, they would take you to the gallows too. Like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah. It won't be long before they're setting them up here, man. Unfortunately. Like, they'll call it somehow more humane than whatever else they're doing. So,
yeah.
Ugh. Well, you ready for our next one?
Speaking of humanity, I think perfect tie-in. So as I said earlier, this story popped off last Wednesday, so I wouldn't have reported on it anyway if we were live. I would have saved it for this week anyway. But this story I found a little interesting because this kind of got mixed, a somewhat mixed response online, and not necessarily in the best way possible, which talking about, issues related to Africa on this show now for Jesus Christ, 4 years.
Yep.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
4 years I've done this show with you. Jesus Christ, it's been too long.
Yep.
But anyway, being very vocal about this for the last 4 years, and kind of how in those 4 years, I'm only saying this in terms of, being in the space and actually having a commitment to kind of share these stories because, for those of you who don't know, I spent some time in Africa, I lived there for a little bit. I grown to love the people there, but also that was where I kind of had my political revolution, so to speak, funny enough, living there. And that kind of has grown into, what I'm doing now. So I'll always have love for Africa, especially given, what I've seen there and kind of the challenges now in terms of how to make sense of what I saw over there in terms of, living here as a Westerner. So this story, I think, mostly depresses me to no end. But on the other hand, depresses me in terms of, I think, the response, which I'm going to talk about later, because the response from certain Black people, I think, kind of undermines the justice that whether you're in Africa or in the Caribbean or in Europe or here or in the West, in North or South America, undermines the justice we are seeking in terms of what happened to us and our ancestors many centuries ago. But then, just the confident ignorance that I do see online, given the history around it, and you can make the argument our history, the way we teach history, is shit. But there's certain basics that I think have been known as fact, and just how it's so easy to kind of twist and gaslight the reality of what happened to us to try and fit a white supremacist narrative that people, whether out of ignorance or just pure contempt, are kind of peddling, especially online. Now, that's to say, it's not to say it's just exclusively online, because I've seen these motherfuckers in the wild too. But I think it's just kind of gross how little we really know about our history, and how many people are just continue to be ignorant of what they choose not to know, and how they don't critically think in terms of how we got here, in terms of the reason why we are here in the West, but asking for the things that we want in terms to atone for what happened to us, and kind of kicking ourselves in the face in my mind, in light of the exceptionalism that we kind of experience here in the West. So all that to say, given that context, so last week, Ghana made a case at the UN for reparations in terms of what happened in the transatlantic slave trade. So this includes me, as I am, an ancestor. My ancestors came from that
region,
regime. Yep. So let's start here first. So this news clip is from DW, which I believe is based in Turkey, I think. But this is their Africa
wing,
Africa region segment. So they're going to talk a little bit more about the resolution that took place at the UN last week, and kind of the history around that. And then this is going to be mostly videos, so but but at least for you all, especially if you're unaware of it, give you some context, and then we'll continue. So let's play this first.
On Ghana's coastline stands Elmina Castle, not just a monument, but a memory carved in stone. Built in 1482, Elmina Castle is the oldest surviving European structure in sub-Saharan Africa, but its legacy is darker. Behind these walls, European powers traded in human lives, and deep below in suffocating dungeons, hundreds were held before being forced through the door of no return. The space you see beside me is the famous door of no return. Now, this door, historians say that you have to lose weight to a certain level before you are able to enter. Once you pass through this door, there's no coming back in here into your country or into the land of your birth. So I'm just going to try to enter this to see if, I'll fit inside. So obviously this is very difficult. This is not a passage that human beings are supposed to enter, but this is what people were subjected to. And this is one of the reasons why Ghana and President John Dramani Mahama is at the United Nations trying to push for reparative justice, demanding that the transatlantic slave trade be recognized as the gravest crime of all humanity. Today, people don't just visit, they come to confront history.
I can only imagine what they went through. But I promise you, this is worse than any story can ever tell you. This is worse than any horror that can scare you, any thriller that can surprise you, and crueler and more depraved than any twisted person can think of. There is no compensation you can do.
But it's a start.
But it is a start.
It's a start.
That start is now at the center of a global push.
Ghana has secured the United Nations backing for the transatlantic slave trade to be declared the gravest crime against humanity. 123 countries supported the resolution, 52 abstained, including the United Kingdom and European countries, while 3 countries, including the US and Israel, opposed it.
The demand is clear. Acknowledgement,
Hold on,
apology,
sorry.
Yes.
So back that up.
Mm-hmm.
So back that up 10 seconds. So this is important,
while
folks. So this is in regards to, right there. So this is in regards to other nations agreeing that slavery is bad, right? Pretty much every country in Europe was like, we ain't touching that.
Yeah.
Right? But the countries that said da were the US, Israel, and Argentina.
Okay.
Argentina is not surprising given,
who's
that's
leading
where
it?
the Nazis emigrated there. That's, not surprising at all. But but the US and Israel, again, Israel being the democracy of the Middle East, who will vetch and bitch about what happened to them in terms of the Holocaust, but cannot imagine or cannot acknowledge me for what happened to my ancestors. So I said this before in the other segment. So to all the Black Zionists, even in that, I'm just kind of like, should be a fucking oxymoron in and of itself. But to any Black person who feels like we should work, and I'm going to be very clear because we had this conversation, I think it was last night, because I want to make this very clear. Not all Jews believe in this bullshit. right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are many Israelis who do. So I want to make that distinction. That being said, if you are a Black person who believes that for whatever reason, we need to ally, we need to be in support of Israel in any way, especially since they cannot acknowledge what happened to us via slavery, but we are forced to acknowledge what happened to them in the Holocaust. I mean, that's all
Yep.
I'm going to say. Like, there's not more that needs to be said. You're basically a coon. You're a coon. So again, of 123 countries that voted in favor of it, pretty much every country in Europe abstained. And the US, Israel, and Argentina were the devils and basically being like, nah, we're against it. So this will kind of go into what I will say later, but I just want you guys to make note of that.
Countries, including the US and Israel, opposed it.
The demand is clear. Acknowledgements, apology, reparations, and a promise it will never happen again. For many, recognition must come first.
An apology is a sign of recognition that yes, we did it, and we acknowledge that it happened. And although it is not us directly that participated, but our ancestors that participated in it, we apologize for it. And it's sort of like it suits you. It's a first step towards the other things that would have to come up. Talk of reparations and all of that. All of those things can't happen without accepting it and apologizing that, yes, it did happen.
Inside the castle, that pain is still palpable. Visitors walk through the same cramped cells, some pausing in silence, others leaving wreaths in memory of those who never returned. For members of the diaspora, the call for justice is personal.
We have been fed lies like we were sold for beads, and we were just casually given up and sold as people of no value. And then on the other side, we got received as people who were slaves. No history prior to slavery. And I believe that we are due reparations for building America, building the so-called New World, and on this side for depriving Africa of its strength and substance that it needed for its own development. So we have been double robbed, double lied to, and it's time to clean up.
Yet, even here, not everyone sees it the same way.
Most of the times, it saddens me, and one way or the other, it's also funny to hear a lot of Ghanaians saying the slave trade is no more. So why don't we just forget about this whole reparation? And then I feel sad whenever I hear people say so, because they don't know the depth of the atrocities which was committed on Africans.
Others say the moment demands action now.
We've been waiting for this to happen. We've had this question from the people from the diaspora since 2019 up to today as they come. So everything that the president is pushing up, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I'm really, really super in support about it. It should go a long way, not only to be talked about, but definitely we really want the white and the world to really recognize that this was one of the most evil trade that ever happened on Earth.
Beyond the castle walls, support for reparative justice is growing. In Elmina, this is not just history, it is lived memory. And now Ghana is asking the world to answer for it.
So I have a couple of things I want to say, and then if you have a comment, Reef, you could share it. Two things. So the woman toward the end saying, like it was basically a double whammy in terms of, like slaves were taken from the lie that and I'll get into more of this later, like that we were taken with, we were sold out, you know, like we sold out for beads or whatever, you know, and like we built
right the
America, whatever, but then
all that stuff.
But then conversely, Africa was deprived of the human resource of my ancestors being taken away from there, that we weren't able to, they were kind of undermined in developing their own country in light of this atrocity, which no one really talks about. Like, this is human life. Like, it's easy to, and I think if you're able to make that connection to Palestine, it's easy to make that connection. Like, they're being deprived of their culture as we speak.
Right.
Same thing happened to my ancestors. My ancestors were deprived of developing themselves to the fullest because some of us were taken, you know, and we'll get into more of the specifics of that in a few minutes. But then the other thing is, and the one, I think his name was Kwesi, one of the tour guides toward the end was saying, you know, how Ghanaians are not really with this reparative stance. I do want to, again, we speak in nuance here. I do get it only because now I'm not sure, I know in Uganda, where I stayed and lived, they're not taught the slave trade, you know, like in their books at all. I looked at them when I was over
Which
there.
you would think,
So,
like of all the people.
Well, given that it's East Africa, you know, it wouldn't be as likely. But
Yeah.
the idea, but that was something that I had to teach the kids at the time when I was over there, because they were wondering, like, how did I manage to get, and I said this story, they assumed that I was an African who was taken by a white family,
Right.
adopted, and brought over to the West, which it's common.
Yeah.
Especially among these Christian circles, which that in of itself, I think, is kind of dangerous.
Is slave trading in and of itself.
Kind of vile. Right.
Yeah.
So I had to explain to them my history in terms of how, you know, once upon a time, I lived in my family, my ancestors lived in West Africa, but then this happened. And that's how I ended up here, you know. So I had to tell them this story. And it's something I should ask my cousin who is Ghanaian, you know, about, but I would imagine even if they know it, it's not really kind of talked about that much. It's just kind of glossed over, you know, which is kind of why, again, you know, kind of the hidden history, you know, that we kind of discuss here all the time. It's also kind of been hidden in terms of just general world history as well. So while I'm not, I don't excuse it in terms of Ghanaians not necessarily knowing or kind of brushing it over, you know, given like social media now and how the information is out there now if you choose to find it. I can understand it in terms of the culture and how, again, this is the result of white supremacy. You know, they will overlook that history so that, or not teach, because, you know, even when I went to Colombia last year, like, and I'm glad I had the tour guide that I did, but he essentially said to me, which is kind of synonymous with what we know of the Global South, history starts when the white people come.
Right.
Like, the indigenous culture prior to that is not talked about. It's pretty much erased. So that makes sense if you're trying to uphold a certain narrative that you don't want people in the Global South to know. So I understand it, even though I don't agree with it or agree with Ghanaian stance on it, if that makes sense.
Yep. I'm with you. You have this video, right? From
yeah.
Ghanaian president.
I brought this. Yes. So this was Mahama who was at the United Nations. So so I have to play this because I'll give some context later. But like, so this is what he was saying. Now, again, this is an African man, like kind of making the case for reparations. But this is why. But this is his case. This is his case of why. People Black people who were affected by the Atlantic slave trade are deserving of reparations. So listen to what he has to say here.
Here in the United States, Black history courses are being removed from school curricula. Schools are being mandated to stop teaching students about the truth of slavery, segregation, and racism in American history courses. Books about those topics are being banned in schools and public libraries. Museums, art centers, and other institutions whose budgets rely in any way on public funds are being prohibited from scheduling exhibitions and programs or from displaying materials promoting racial awareness or Black history. Much like the law that was put in place to regulate the punishment of the enslaved in Barbados, these policies are becoming a template for other governments as well as some private institutions. At the very least, they are slowly normalizing the erasure. They are slowly normalizing erasure.
So, I mean, where's the lie? Like, and I loved that he called, like, we talked about this on this show. I think we talked about it like last summer when I came back from London. He talked about the slave codes. Those were based in Barbados, right? Like, the reason how we have slavery, how it was perfected here, was based on the experimentation that was done in Barbados, which is where my dad's family is from. So, so I'm glad he made that link. But also, mostly he was saying, like, he talked about how, and we've seen this, especially, you can make the argument it's been happening, but it's accelerated under Trump and this administration of purposely erasing Black history. And I would argue, not just limited to here, it's happening in the global South as well. Like, certain events are not talked about or talked in a very minimal way to not give away the game in terms of how the powers that be oppressed us and are keeping us divided on purpose so that we will never have the chance to come together and demand, in this case, reparations in the fullest of what we are able to do. But having him say all of this, of course, the FBA ADOS communities got big mad. Like, among other things, but they were basically calling him, like he's just looking to get reparations for his country, because we all know Africans to be criminals and schemers and all that kind of bullshit, and trying to take our file away for reparations of what we're trying to do, and like all this kind of bullshit that, that has existed since I've been in this space dealing with all these motherfuckers online for the last few years. Of course, they come out salty over him and others who are speaking in need of for them. He was making the case for you.
Right.
And instead of getting mad at the people that put you in the positions where you're now you're getting mad at the Africans who are actually calling this out.
Or even
like,
getting
I'm
mad
not seeing any Black
at like Ghana also accepting UN security fucking shit. Like, that's, what is it, UN security agreement? Have you heard about that? They accepted that too. Like, that's shitty. Yell about that. This though is like, should be a no-brainer. Like,
right. Like, again, where was the lie in what Mahatma said? in any of that. He was making the case for you. You should be happy that he spoke up on your behalf, because look, I've said this. Look, and this is the gag, because a lot of Black Americans say, "Oh, we're indigenous to this country." Like, people like me, you could fight for reparations, but you do it where you are. Like, you do it in the Caribbean, or you do it where you come from. We'll take care of our business here.
And then when shit happens, they're all upset.
And then when it happens, you get mad.
Yeah.
Again, I thought I thought we were on our own. Like, and again, this is affecting people from the transatlantic slave trade. You guys say that you're indigenous here. So this really has nothing to do with you.
Which we all know.
So why are
that
you
is.
mad?
If you really want to go look at history,
Right. We know why, but but it's just kind of, I find it hilarious, but this is where the ignorance and the pure, and this is why I cannot take these seriously. And again, a lot of these people are bots online.
Yeah.
We had on
CIA influencers, or they're like,
yeah, but they do exist in real time.
Yeah.
They do promote this shit. There are a few that I've met personally that promote this shit, that I'm kind of like, I have to kind of be like, look, and look, here's the thing. As much disagreement I have with my own father, but when the times he says, what is wrong with us?
Yeah,
this is one of the times when this is one of those times where I actually agree with him as to what is wrong with us. And in a way, it kind of slaps in the face of the work. Now, I don't agree with my dad on many things and how he does things or whatever. You guys know that on this show. But at least what I could say about my father, he's tried to create that legacy for Black people to understand where they come from. And the fact that these people are so ignorant, and it's not like the information, granted, it may be hard to find, but it's not impossible to get the information. But you're choosing to ignore it, or you're choosing to live in whatever la land in order to fit not your narrative,
from what I've seen,
to fit the narrative.
A lot of it coincides with like ancient aliens revisionist history crap, like God of the Gaps. Because we don't have the history and don't know it well enough, we're gonna invent our own realities and pop them in there, because like there's big gaps in it that we can exploit and maneuver. And like we've talked about this, as far as like a lot of this is like really white rape of Black people, like causing the gene pool to be not as like nice when we go back and look. But like they don't even buy the whole, genealogy's a lie. It's you're not from there. Like it's like, okay, and they'll pull whatever study they want to, back it up. Like it's just kind of like, all right. So
let's end the slideshow. I want to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
So just again, as we said earlier, the UN General Embassy has adopted a draft resolution. So again, all of this is, this is a resolution. So this is merely symbolic, in its terms. It's not leading to any policy, at least right now, or anything like that.
Right. It could be
right now mostly
but...
to get people or these countries on record.
Yeah.
Which I think this is a significant part of this, in terms of who believes that the transatlantic slave trade is the most humane and enduring injustice against humanity. So as it was in the news report, 123 countries who were present were in favor, 3 were against. The devils of the U.S., Israel, and Argentina, and 52 abstentions. Pretty much all of them Europe and West proxy nations. So you can see
abstains in yellow. We got Sweden, Switzerland, Poland, Portugal, Moldova, Romania, San Marino, Montenegro, Monaco, Malta, Luxembourg, yeah, of course, Lithuania, Liechtenstein, like Latvia, Greece, Georgia, Germany, France, Finland, Canada, Cyprus, Chechnya, Croatia, Austria, Australia, Armenia. Yeah. I know which one. Oman abstained because they were leading the Arab slave trade. 18 million lives lost. Like, yeah, they don't want shit coming for them. Neither does, I'm sure, like, where are the Saudis in all this, you know? Like United Arab Emirates, they
I saw somebody say online they were surprised that certain Asian countries abstained. I said I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, no offense to anyone in Asian like Japan, whatever, but there's a low-key anti-blank sentiment.
There's a low-key a lot of stuff. Keep in mind what side they were on. There's low-key a lot of crap.
So, right.
You know?
So, it didn't shock me in the slightest. Like, certain Asian countries abstained, you know? But you brought this tweet from Nora. Who said, this result tells us three things, my dear Africans. 1, we are all on our own. 2, every European nation that systematically benefited from slavery abstained. 3, Oman abstained because they were leading the Arab slave trade. 18 million lives lost.
Yep.
But there is some silver lining. Again, you know, guess who voted in favor?
Yep.
The state of Palestine co-sponsored the revolution, and the Palestinian people stand in solidarity with the millions of African victims of trafficking and radicalizing chattel enslavement. May this injustice never be perpetuated again. May its enduring radical, economic, ecological, and political harms end, and may its victims find reparatory justice and accountability. So to all the Black folks who say we should have no business with Palestine and all this kind of bullshit, they want you to have reparations. And I've said this before. If Palestine is ever in the position where they will get reparations, watch them cry and play victim all day long. And speaking of,
if we're talking
yes.
So I brought this. This is actually from a longer clip. I'm just going to play what this motherfucker has to say, because this is kind of this discourse that was kind of popping off online since all of this went down. This was just one example out of many that I saw on Twitter and everything else regarding this whole resolution business with Ghana. So you can play this. This is about 30 seconds.
If we're talking about reparations from the United States, then that's strictly exclusively to Black Americans, ADOS and freemen, the descendants of Black enslaved Americans and the descendants of freemen in this country. Now, Africa was a co-conspirator, especially Ghana. Ghana turned slavery into tourism. They making money off all those slave castles, millions of dollars, right? Let's not talk about that, how they're co-conspirators.
Right. So let me get to that for a second. My dude, who's going over there? Right? Many of those people who are going as tourists are Black Americans. You dumb motherfucker. Like, who are looking to learn about their history to make the case for you in terms of reparations. So someone in the chat, is this sub-psyop bullshit? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Because this is what I mean when they're trying to kick themselves in the teeth, because they don't want like, you should not be fighting. You're essentially making the case for you not to get reparations.
Right.
And this is all in the benefit of our government. As I said, and as they said, they're not going to give you reparations. They just told you from this resolution, we ain't giving you shit. So the idea that you're going against the very people who are trying to work on your behalf, you're an idiot. Case in point, I'm going to bring in this next clip. This is actually someone that I saw on Instagram. I thought it was just like a short clip, but he actually has like a 20-minute clip of this, which I'm glad he did. This is a content creator called The Merc. I believe he's based in Nigeria. So, and I believe he also has a podcast as well. So we're actually going to watch probably about half of it, but he breaks it down in terms of like all this bullshit among the FBA ADOS community and how Africans are affected by it. Now, I liked what he was kind of saying mostly because he does bring nuance to this. He also kind of calls out Africans as well. But let's see what he has to say in regards to this whole discourse, especially what we're hearing here about Africans sold Black Americans out or whatever, like that whole like talking point that I see a lot online. So he will break it down for us. So go ahead.
Nope, sorry.
Black Americans being annoyed that why are you asking for reparations when you sold us into slavery? So you are responsible for it as well, and we should even be getting reparations from you. In case you're not aware, guys, that is a white supremacist talking point. I mean, you may not be aware of this because there's a lot of ignorance out there. The talking point that Africans sold them the slaves. So why are you looking at us? You guys did it too, is a white supremacist talking point. Because it serves multiple purposes. One of them is to deflect responsibility and say that stop looking at us. I mean, you sold them to us. If you didn't sell them to us, how we couldn't have got them. You know, I mean, it's a lie. It's a lie. Yes, Africans did sell slaves to Europeans. They were involved in the slave trade. That is 100% true. But on a very basic level, are you going to hold responsible the entire African community for the actions of a few coons or for a few sellouts? There were sellouts and coons in Black America who were working with slave masters, catching slaves and abusing slaves in the United States. That doesn't mean that the entire Black population in America now don't deserve reparations based on the actions of.
So he brings up a good point, which is also what I've said. Like, it would have been the African chiefs or like basically the elite within those tribes that was selling you off. You know, so you're going to blame a couple of African chiefs or kings or whatever against the hundreds and thousands of normal people who were shipped off into slavery. Are you going to do that? Because as he called out, like, there are coons in Africa, and we said this on this show. I've said this many times. There are coons in this country too, right? Yep. That you can easily call out. So there are coons in every culture. So what he's saying there, I think is spot on, and it's not unique to Black Americans. So, you know, but the idea, it's like, you're going to blame a couple of people you're going to hold a couple of people responsible for the rest of us who essentially, through no fault of our own, was sold to slavery. That makes no damn sense. But again, I'm glad he kind of called that talking point of like, oh, like Africa as a whole sold you off. And he's going to go into it a little bit more, so you can play the rest of it.
Some people who sold them out during slavery. It's just it's a ridiculous, boneheaded concept. But again, that is one. The main thing is the concept of Africans being a monolith. Africa wasn't a monolith. A lot of the slaves that were sold were enemies of the states that were selling them to the Europeans. So you'd have a war, you'd capture people, and you'd have them as prisoners, and the Americans would say that, oh, we'll buy it, and they sold them. These Africans had no idea the horrors that these people were going to face in overseas. They didn't know that. Because the kind of slavery that Africans were practicing in Africa, they were not treating them anywhere even close to the brutality and horribly as the North Americans and Spanish and Portuguese and French and all these people treated slaves and things that they were doing in the plantations and the colonies. It wasn't even close. So they didn't even have a concept that was the horror that they were sending them to. That's the first thing. But the way that I always try to explain this to people
Pause here.
is like this.
So again, this is kind of where, and we've also said this on the show, because like slavery is as old as time itself. Like Romans did it, Greeks did it, like everyone did it. The difference between what was going on prior to the transatlantic slave trade, it's capitalism. That's the main difference. The type that was done to me and my ancestors was for profit. Prior to that, you became essentially, I think, the equivalent of an indentured servant to war or like taking over powers or whatever, which was fairly common. So it'll make sense if an African chief, if like you came up with a white guy and it was like, oh, we're going to sell into slavery. That was a concept that they were thinking of.
Right.
It's like, oh, they took over us. So, you know, it's going to be like how we do things in our tribe or whatever. They weren't thinking in terms of like, oh, they're going to sell off these people and like have them work for nothing and like in this capitalistic regime. They weren't thinking that. That was a new thing. And as I said, these systems were perfected in the Caribbean. This is what was happening then that they brought over to, and guys, again, check out my clip on the Barbados slave codes. I probably did that maybe around 6 months ago. Like, no, actually probably close to 8 months ago. It's on our playlist. That goes into this. So again, it's that concept of the slavery that was done prior to this was different compared to what we know the transatlantic slave trade to be, which was based on money. It was based on exploitation, which hadn't happened prior to that. So I'm glad he kind of gives that context and that nuance there. So like, which again, if you know your history, that will kind of make sense. Let's keep going.
If a Frenchman in the 1800s, 1700s, or whatever, sold an English prisoner, an Englishman, to a foreign nation as a slave, would you say the Frenchman was selling his own? You wouldn't, would you? Or vice versa. But because these people are so racist, they think Africa was just one thing. So any African selling another African to them, as far as they're concerned, you're selling somebody that's your... Dudes, Africa, even in Nigeria, the present day Nigeria has 54 different tribes. Just in Nigeria alone. Let alone if you start going to Africa. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different kingdoms, different tribes, different... When one guy is selling somebody off, like, they're not looking at them as the same person, at the same group. They're from another tribe, another place. That's another point that people seem to ignore. Now, this is one of the most important points about why this is just a dumb way of looking at this. Do you think that these African chiefs had a choice? Do you think that the English empire went there and said, oh, pretty please, could you sell us the slaves? And if you say no, okay. Or the Spanish were like, oh. Or the French were like, oh. Or the Belgians were like, oh. Or the Portuguese were like, oh. It was sell or die. Sell or we destroy your kingdom. Sell or we take. Sell or we burn. That was the choice. So either you're going to sell us these people and you're going to make some money and some weapons and whatever on the side as well, or we're going to take them anyway and destroy your kingdom. Do I need to remind you of the many stories I've already told on my channel of what happened to chiefs that opposed slavery? What happened to leaders that opposed? They wiped these people out. So when you hear a Black American who is uneducated on the truth of what actually happened to our ancestors, our shared ancestors in Africa, and start repeating and parroting this nonsense, rhetoric of white supremacists and racists who do not want either of us to get our reparations. And they want to set us against each other by feeding in this nonsense. You are doing the work of your oppressor. Because you have to understand, there were victims on both sides of the Atlantic. In Africa, slavery destroyed families, destroyed communities, destroyed kingdoms, destroyed culture, destroyed history, destroyed language, destroyed religion, destroyed identity. To this day, all the civil wars that have been fought in Africa is linked to colonialism and slavery. Every single one. But you won't read about that in any history books. So when you come out and you support this nonsense, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because you have to understand that Ghana being successful with this helps your claim for reparations from the American government. Because Ghana's claim is not necessarily just with the American government, it's with the British, the French, the Belgians, the Portuguese, the Spanish, all of them. Which is why they're going to the UN. Because it's all of these people who are responsible for it.
All the ones that abstained.
Right. People will come and try and cite, but the British abolished slavery after you finished benefiting from it for hundreds of years. And even when you abolished it, you then paid your slave owners reparations to the tune of £2.8 billion, which you made your own citizens pay through taxes up until 2015, including the descendants of the people that you enslaved and colonized. Think about how crazy that is. How diabolical that is. That's the reality of things. So you have to understand that the reason why this discontent is being stoked and the reason why FBA and people are now coming out and pushing back against Africans asking for reparations isn't about you getting reparations. It's about stopping reparations entirely. Because these two groups united going for reparations have a better chance than separate. You see, the Africans now doing this, the Black Americans have the power to torpedo the Africans' claim. Black Americans going for reparations, African immigrants who come to your country and look down on you, point fingers at you, tell you that you're lazy, it's your fault that you're in the position that you're in. Look at how well we're doing when we come to your country. They are helping to torpedo your claim for reparations. You see how that works? So the guy who is the puppet master above just looks at us like children, bickering and spoiling the opportunity of each other so they don't have to. Because you can't even agree amongst yourselves what you want.
Haven't I said this?
Mm-hmm.
I've said this. And look, I've said this on this show. Do Africans or Black immigrants, when they come to the West, they disparage Black Americans at times? Yes. Yes. I've said that. Hell, my own father has said disparaging things against Black, basically every Black person, period. So Black Americans too. That exists.
Don't ask, middle-class white Americans what they think of poor white Americans. It's same shit.
It's the same shit. It happens in every culture. But it's the idea of, so I'm glad he mentioned that because that does happen. It's not to say but even then, there's kind of the victimhood. It's kind of that's kind of what they Black Americans go with mostly. It's a talking point of, you come here and you take our jobs and you do better than us and you look down on us and all that kind of stuff. Well, and I kind of blame the media partially for that as well.
Yeah.
Because it's what's being represented about Black people in America more often than not. It's the stuff that you will see on BET and all of these shows Housewives and all that kind of stuff that puts us in a bad light. The Africans are kind of what the hell are you doing over there? That's what they're seeing.
Yeah.
But especially mostly, if you're looking to get reparations, where's the organization? Where is the fervency in getting what you want? But instead, you look to all these celebrities as your saviors of this is a person who made it. Meanwhile, you're living in low-income housing, making how much money a year, trying to get by, but you're looking up to these very people. And it's funny because people are going off on Chile and TLC, basically giving money to Trump. And I'm like, but you look to her as kind of like the one who made it. And she's not, again, like I make the argument, whether she gave to blue or red doesn't make much of a difference to me. She's rich.
Right. What does Ja Rule think about this?
Right. She rich. And I'll argue most black celebrities are low-key Republican anyway, so that shouldn't be a surprise to any one of y'all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea of how this infighting is what the white supremacists want. We are doing the work for them. And instead of, and this is why I push Kwame Ture so hard. This is why I pushed Malcolm X so hard. Hell, we learned about Paul Robeson like a month, 2 months ago now.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I pushed these people so hard, because they understood, like, in order for us to get the justice that we need, we have to go beyond these borders and connect to the people who are living in other places, especially in the global South, to build community, but two, more importantly, build organization, which we failed. So, and that's the frustrating part, is that we should be a lot further along in this than we should be, given what our ancestors left us with. And the example that we have in order to stand in their shoes and kind of take on what they were doing. But we're choosing not to do that. We're instead choosing to snipe at each other over lies. Let's keep going.
Foolish, stupid, idiotic, bumbling oafishness. If you ascribe to that, everything I just said applies to you. Yes, it's an insult. Everything I just said, if you agree with and with this sort of mode of action, everything I said applies to you. Because neither of us will get you will not get what you want. It's impossible. Because both sides are going to be... What do you think is going to happen the next time the Black Americans now get some leverage or traction in going for reparations? What do you think all these backhanded, double, two-faced immigrants, African immigrants, are going to do in America? They're going to torpedo yours. There has to be a line drawn in the community. We will not tolerate any sniping from either side, period. That is the hard line that needs to be drawn, which you know that I ascribe to that. I've told you multiple times, I've called out the African community and African immigrants for coonish behavior against Black America. I've said it all the time against Black Americans. It's unbelievable. We are saboteurs. When I say we, not me personally, but Black immigrants to African immigrants to America often act as saboteurs. And one of the biggest culprits are Nigerian immigrants, because we do so well in foreign nations. We are always the model African when it comes to academics, money making, investing, working hard, all of these things, representation. Nigerians. So we are the best tool against you. And only if people like myself and other Nigerians who understand what the game is call our own people out, we're not going to get anywhere. Which is why Black Americans need to call their own people out when they start doing nonsense like this. Because everybody that I've seen who's commented negatively about what Ghana is doing, who's from Black America, you need to call these people out. Because you're playing yourselves. If Ghana gets traction, do you think that's not going to help you? How are you helped by stopping them? How does that benefit you? Think about it. Like, what is the benefit? Because you know these negative forces, these white supremacists and these agents, and they're going to be pushing FBA and pushing, yeah, you're right. Go and look at the comments. I've already looked at the comments. And you go to the profiles, they're fake profiles, saying, yeah, exactly. Fight for your what's right. Yes, fake profiles. because they want you to fight. These are agents, folks. These are agents, folks. You heard it here. COINTELPRO. Go and look it up. This is not the first time. FBI have been doing this forever. CIA have been doing this forever. This is not the first time. Like, you're looking at this like, why are we fighting each other over things like this? Why? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. That is my perspective on things. In fact, look, and I'll say this. The biggest problem we have in our community is ignorance. We are ignorant. We do not control our narrative. We do not control our education. We control nothing. So the way we think is compromised. We don't have the ability for critical thinking because the material in our brain is corrupted.
I mean, he said it in a way, in a more clearer way than I probably have ever said it in the last 4 years being on this show. But he's called it, and I'm glad he called both sides out. So I really appreciate him calling out immigrants as well as Black Americans, because we all have our part to play in this. But when we're going after the same thing, essentially, like, we have to make a stand and be like, all right, in spite of everything, we are united on this one issue of what we ever have to do in order to get the issue that we want, get over ourselves so we can get it. But I do think, like, on the Black American side, mostly, I think a lot of where this is coming from is, again, the exceptionalism that we experience in America. Like, oh, we're better, we're the best at this thing, or we're the first at this thing, or we're the only ones that can have this thing. That has kind of perpetuated itself in Black culture. So it's the idea of like, oh, we're the only ones who went through slavery. We're the only ones who deserve reparations. And again, as I say, boo-boo, your experience here is not unique to what happened in the Caribbean, what happened in Latin America, what happened in Europe, what happened in Africa. You're not that special. No offense. So that was kind of a lot of the discourse. So I'm glad he kind of called out both sides. On that. Because as I said, like, Africans and people in the Caribbean and in Europe, like Black Europeans or whatever else, we're not innocent in all this either. But in terms of solidarity, especially if we believe in this, we have to come together and try and figure this out, because white supremacists have already figured it out and they're making us fight each other. We're doing the dirty work for them. I'm going to skip a couple of things for time, but I do want to read this tweet. No, I'm going to skip that. Basically, I'm just playing because he mentioned, the Merc kind of mentioned, you know, how African chiefs didn't resist.
Right.
But I kind of want to show how, like, slaves did. Like, my tribe, Igbo, which is based in Nigeria, we resisted, you know, like the Igbos that came here. I wanted to show an example of that. Not going to do that for time. That might be another segment for another time. But actually, if we go back 2 slides, Reef. Yeah. So just wanted to put this up because I thought it was funny. Well, you brought this, I think. So this is from Kamiverse, I guess is what it is. FBI crime because God is fighting for reparations, even though they claim to be indigenous Aboriginal Americans and therefore have nothing to do with Africa, which makes it my point. You guys shouldn't be mad if you're from here, right? Like, if you're from here, this doesn't apply to you. So, so if we go forward a couple of slides now. But to end it, this is from @Farina_N. I think she kind of summarizes this very well. It might be kind of curt, but who cares? My job is to hurt the FBAs in whatever way I can. I have no apologies in saying so. But she says, a special message for the Africans whose only contribution to this continent is telling Pan-Africanists to stop complaining. You have written nothing, built nothing, documented nothing, organized nothing, sacrificed nothing, contributed nothing. Your entire political existence is a posture of exasperation directed at the people who are actually in the arena. And yet here you are, with the confidence that only total inaction can produce, telling us we are playing victims. We're making excuses and we should move on. Move on from what exactly? You cannot answer that because you have not read enough to know what we're moving on from. You have not done enough to know what moving on would even require. You have not built enough to understand what is still actively working against everything we're trying to construct. And the most revealing part is this. Pan-Africanism is 2 centuries old. It is a school of thought so vast, so rigorous, so multidisciplinary that it has produced mathematicians, historians, sociologists, researchers, philosophers, economics, and activists across generations and continents. It has given us Du Bois, Bukhara, Fanon, Rodney, Cabral, Diop, Garvey, an entire intellectual tradition that has diagnosed, documented, and proposed solutions to the domination of this continent and its descendants from every conceivable angle. It has survived colonialism, the assassination of its leaders, the banning of its literature, the defunding of its institutions, and the full machinery of Western interference, and is still here, still producing, still organizing, still building. And you, after 2 centuries of facing the most sophisticated intellectual and political tradition this struggle has ever produced, what have you brought to counter it? What is your school of thought? What is your framework? What is your counter-analysis? Where are your historians, your economists, your researchers? Where is the body of work that dismantles what Farron built, what Rodney documented, what Bukhara architected? Because if it exists, we have not seen it. What we have seen is a posture, a recurring content-free, evidence-free posture of exasperation that has not produced a single original thought in 200 years of trying. Your ranting is not rebuttal. Your making excuses is not an alternative framework. Stop playing victim is not a school of thought. It is the absence of one dressed up as common sense. Your contribution to African liberation is criticizing the people contributing to African liberation. That is it. That's the whole resume. Delivered with such conviction, such righteous irritation, as if exhaustion with the people doing the work is itself a form of the work. Well, it is not. It is the oldest trick in the colonial playbook, and the most tragic part is that you're running it on yourself against your own people for free without anyone even asking you to. Pan-Africanism has a library. What you have is a mere complaint. And the complaint is always the same, which is itself the most damning evidence of the intellectual bankruptcy we are dealing with. The system that underdeveloped this continent could not have designed a more useful product than an African who polices other Africans for talking about the system. You're not realists as you so claim to be. Neither are you a pragmatist. You are not even a critic. What you are is a volunteer in the service of those who are fighting to liberate you and your descendants from. And to make matters worse, you do not even receive a stipend for your servitude. You are the most committed unpaid intern in the history of oppression. Doing the night shift, on call, all weekends, all for free. I mean, can't say any better myself.
Yep.
But I think basically, it's just the idea. And I apologize, this was long, but I feel this has to be said. And I had a rant going for a while. So thank you for obliging me in that. But I feel this is very important. That, in the 4 and, like, given that we've been on the show now for 4 years, like, I actually want to thank you and Indy for giving me the platform, not to kind of speak about things, but giving me the freedom and the liberation to learn more about this for myself. Because, you know, when I first came on this show, it was like, you asked me to do it, and I didn't want to do it because I thought I didn't know anything. I
Right.
thought I didn't deserve to be here. But, and it's not to say I feel like at times I still don't know a lot. Like, and I kind of look to you and Indy for that. But I
Which
feel like now
I feel
I'm
the same.
able
I don't
to
know shit. You know?
But
like,
but I feel now like I understand myself better in terms of who I am and why I am meant to be here. But more importantly, it's like it's developed an interest, a curiosity of people that we've met, quote unquote, you know, in terms of learning and discovering, even along the way, new people who we haven't even necessarily known, but getting to know them and being like, oh, this is interesting. What they talked about, it makes more for curiosity for me in terms of learning more about these people that really should be known more and really should be talked about more in terms of how, and I mean, obviously in this segment we talked about African liberation, but the argument is liberation for all people, honestly. So, you know, but again, it's the idea of like, I get so mad because if you are purposely or not trying to negate progress, especially in terms of the liberation that, especially for someone like my father who's been trying to find out in his way what that meant for him in terms of working within the diaspora. Like, I cannot forgive that. I hate that. Because you're undermining his work, whether I agree with it or not, it's still a value. And the idea that people who undermine that, I hate them. I truly do. But I hate the system that puts us in the place where it allows us to be ignorant and forces us, not even willingly or not, causes this discourse. And we're not able to get what we want.
Yeah.
We're doing the work for them. And that's the shame. When we should be united and working in solidarity in one another, even if we disagree on the details. But this is like an issue that we're all within the diaspora looking for. And that's what I've always said, and that's why I will always hold. We shouldn't be like working in our, yeah, obviously there's going to be like some differences in reparations that Black Americans will receive that I will receive. But it's still the same idea of oppression and capitalism that brought us here. So why not kind of combine forces and kind of work together in terms of the similarities, but then the cultural differences that, you know, define who we are, whether Black American or Black European or African or Afro-Latino or however you identify. Like, what are the things that unite us that we can make a stand against? Not fight each other in the guise of certain people are not deserving of this certain thing. And that's what, yeah. And I thank you for allowing me to understand that more in terms of doing this show, but then giving me the freedom to learn more so that I'm able to understand myself better in context of that.
Well, you're welcome. You do the same for me, pretty much. You know? So, because there's plenty of stuff you brought I had no idea. So,
right.
You
And
know.
look, I mean, on this show, you know, I know some people, like even in our audience, may not always agree on reparations, including you. Although I feel like you have a better understanding of this now.
Yeah.
But I hope this is also why I do this too, because again, reparations has nothing to do with all y'all, right? It has everything to do with the system that has oppressed my family, that there's aspects of my identity that I don't know, that I may never know, that we're looking to atone for. And again, as I said, if you're able to see that for Palestinians right now, it shouldn't be so hard of a stretch to figure this out for Black people too. That's all we're saying. It has nothing to do with you. And as I said, if it's so easy for the US to send Israel billions of dollars every year for them to bomb the shit, it shouldn't be that hard to make amends for the history that they committed, white supremacists committed to my people. So again, I know a lot of you don't understand it or feel differently, but understand where I come from in the context of that. And that's all I ask. It's that understanding or that willingness at minimum to listen to why this is important, at least to me.
Yeah.
But let us know what you think. Do you think Ghana had the right to declare reparations? What do you think of how certain countries either abstained or like nah? And how do you feel like of the opposition among Black Americans who didn't appreciate what Africa was standing for? And again, this is a resolution, so it was more symbolic, but we have countries on record in terms of where they stand. And really, it should be the idea of fighting these countries, but we're not even having that discussion. It's the idea of like, oh, this African man is trying to take money from us, which I think is total bullshit. But that could be a conversation for another day. But let us know.
Right.
And again, FBAs, I don't give a fuck. You can come at me all you want. You can, I don't care. Do your worst. Because there are plenty of Black people who do not think what you think. So you can fuck off with that. But likewise, thank you for watching. And leave us a comment. And if it's not nice, we will delete it. We'll make that clear right now. But for the rest of you, if you have something serious to say, let us know what you think. And thanks for watching.
Shoot, I leave them up. I just leave thanks for watching underneath it, just so that they know they still watched.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, let's look at chat for a bit, and then we'll get to our last one. Finish things out.
Yeah. That's a very long one, but
yep.
But appreciate you guys hanging in there with me for that. That was two weeks worth of
Neo Nostrum. Yeah, fuck Oman, respected negotiator between Iran and Israel today. Yep. Yeah, but definitely some interesting discussions to be had about it, I think.
Right. Hold on. So, Neo Nostrum, do you guys think there is a PSYOP active in the APA Pan-African Internet beef?
Absolutely.
Was that paranoid? Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely is a PSYOP. Absolutely is a PSYOP.
And it's been happening for a minute. So
yeah. Cookies, even for being an oxymoron, there's still a vast number of Black Zionists. Yep.
Yep.
Which is, and not even necessarily Black Zionists, but like people who are willing to work in solidarity with Israel for whatever reason. Like
that brings up an interesting point. Because I've asked this mainly because I know nothing about Rastafarianism or the teachings of Haile Selassie in regards to Zion now. Like a lot of talk about, Marley talks about Zion frequently, a bunch of them, right? Like, what does that mean now to them? Like, I would just like to have some discussions with them about it,
Right.
So,
especially given how barbaric
Yep.
Israel is. So, but again, that's kind of like, and that's the danger of religion. It's like, it's romanticizing this ideal, which I get, but the reality is not happening in that way.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't happen at the cost of lives being taken away. So it is interesting to see how they feel about that. I think it could be just head in the sand and just keep trucking. I think that's kind of like,
right.
And hanging on to, I don't want to call it a fairy tale because there
I
should
will.
be an ideal of like, but I mean, there should be an ideal, but like, if you want that ideal, how you're working towards that to make that,
Yeah.
what's the actionable steps you're making to make that reality? That's what that's kind of, and I'm sure we're going to probably get into that in the next segment.
Yeah,
but like, what is the action you're taking to make what you're hoping for real?
Right.
So, like, don't just sit by and twiddle your thumbs in the hope that it happens. I think that would be kind of interesting. And like, I see that in the church. So I wonder if that's kind of a similar thing within the Rastafari movement too.
Yeah. I would just be interested,
to be honest.
just because the language they've used. I mean, they've definitely been pretty anti-imperial in nature, but you know, would be interesting. But let's go ahead.
I think so too. I think it comes down to a misunderstanding about the African indigenous history that comes from slaves that were accepted as freemen by some indigenous and enslaved by others. So again, if you look at world history, like
a lot of misinformation,
Rome,
like
right, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, like they were battling and scheming and like all the things, and they were just swapping over like people that they captured or whatever. Again, that was kind of indentured servitude. That was happening in Africa. Again, Africa is not the countries that we think of now. That was due to the Berlin Conference, which we also talked about on this show, how that is structured the way it is now. And that was over resources. Like this country is like, we'll take this area to pick this thing, another country came to pick that thing. And
well,
like
it's also just
basically fucked up the tribe.
A lot of it's like history out of context and like not under, like even when you're talking about like that, the Roman stuff and the Egyptian stuff, like that's constantly like scrutinized and went over and readjusted and to like better match what we know.
Right. But I think people think of slaves, and I think unfortunately due to what happened to Black people, I think people just kind of narrow it in that lens.
Yeah.
When that wasn't it. It was more equivalent, at least back in the day, of an indentured servant. Like, you know, not to say it was great, but like kind of more along those lines. Like you took over a piece of land or tribe or whatever, you take the spoils, which were people that you put as slaves.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a profit motive. That was more like we conquer.
Yeah.
Like the idea of chattel slavery was money. We're taking these people to work for nothing in order to build infrastructure. Like that was the thing. That was the next thing. That was the evolution of slavery, which was what made it. But I think people think of it in that mindset only, when it's kind of a little more, I wouldn't say nuanced, but there's a lot, it's more layered than that, I think is a better way of saying.
No, I
that
feel
people
you.
need to realize.
Well, let's get to our last one. So you sent me this, and I had already kind of had it saved. So I was just like, okay, well, we'll definitely do this Wednesday then. And like, I didn't have anything else. So I was like, sure. But I thought it would at least lead to an interesting discussion. You know, we have these discussions by ourselves among friends, right? Especially when in regards to Judaism and its role in the genocide that is taking place in Israel. So, but you sent me this from Amanda Gelander, right? Jewish anti-Zionist writer. okay, who says, yes, all Jews must kill Zionism within Judaism, which, Amanda, you got me, I was definitely worried about the thumbnail and title for this evening, depending on how YouTube wanted to play its hands, with us. So I made some slight adjustments that might get us under the radar. But I definitely wanted to read your work. So she writes, I have come to have tremendous disdain for my people, the evil we have wrought, and the demons we have become, our craven hypocrisy, our Holocaust hand-wringing, our selfish dissociation, our bottomless both-sidesing, our catatonic inaction, our feeble sign-waving, our condescending condemnations, our wallowing victim complex, our self-indulgent betrayals, our brazen self-centeredness, our exploitative careerism, our blood and soil racism, our liberal cowardice, our mountains of empty platitudes amongst mountains of Palestinian corpses that we annihilated in cold blood. Hell of an opening paragraph. So,
yeah,
Israel has likely killed hundreds of thousands of people in 2.5 years of nonstop bombardment, executions, and engineered starvation in Gaza. The depths of our sadism seemingly knows no bounds. One of the last time that Judaism's breath and beating heart, the prophet Moses delivered, existed and showed itself, died in Auschwitz, when Jewish Zionists were already busy building what would become the Jewish death colony, Israel. Whether or not an echo of Moses' Judaism can still exist, or it is recuperable, is yet to be determined, but I can confidently state, I don't care. That's not why I'm here. I do not have the willingness or desire to even entertain possibilities of Judaism's continuity until the Zionist entity is ashes and Palestine is free. This is not a navel-gazing fight for the soul of Judaism. Palestine is not our Jewish moral reckoning. There isn't a morsel of Jewish morality in sight. Palestine is an anti-colonial and decolonial liberation struggle in which we Jews are the fascistic overlords, the fascist propagandists and funders, the militarized soldier settlers demolishing and stealing homes, igniting West Bank pogroms, and executing children en masse. Jewish Zionists will say this evokes anti-Semitic tropes. We don't care. Your words fall entirely flat as Jews in Israel celebrate Purim by cheering on bombings like the murder of 165 schoolgirls and staff killed by U.S. Israeli airstrikes on Iran. The truth of Jewish terrorism is already seared into Palestinian land, jaggedly branded and carved into Palestinian skin with swastikas of David. Jews not dwell in and animate the age of totalitarian Judaism. I don't want to hear about anti-Semitism or Jewish victimhood ever again. Zionists insist that hating Israel is tantamount to hating Jews, then in the same breath demand that people do not conflate Israel with Jews. When I remark to Jews that we are all responsible for ending Zionism and the ongoing Palestinian genocide, I usually hear, not all Jews say Zionists, not Jews. There are actually more Christian Zionists than Jewish ones. Well, I am speaking to Jews right now, a people who support fascist Zionism in lockstep across every institution in our community. Enough with the innocent deflection of responsibility. Jews consider ourselves a proud collective people, an unbroken lineage from generation to generation, up until the cracked mirror of modern Judaism reflects back nothing but terrorism, slaughter, blood, sadism, rape, and organ theft. Virtually every Jewish group supports the existence of Israel in some shape or form, and we dare to point the fingers at others instead of cleaning up our own filthy house. Organized Jewish formations across our entire community keep the colony humming through die-hard and consistent commitment, propaganda, money, and resources, considering strengthening and defending Israel to not only be a mitzvah, but part of their duty toward the Jewish people and an extension of their Jewish identity. Mind you, Jewish people are currently operating a string of torture and rape dungeons in Palestine and pummeling Lebanon and Iran with airstrikes. Israeli torturers recently abducted and burned cigarettes into the thighs of a 1-year-old Palestinian child. This is the Jewish state. This is how far gone we are. Zionism is not fringe within Judaism, it is ubiquitous. It is incumbent upon Jewish people of conscience to make the distinction between Zionism and Judaism materially true, by destroying Zionism in our own communities, not denying our widespread complicity, and policing others merely observing the fascistic reality of modern Judaism. At great cost to themselves and their people, Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims have stated these truths plainly for generations. Writer Nada Chahade vividly describes the reality of Jewish settler colonialism every day. None of what I'm stating is new. It is only rare for a Jew to hear it from a Jew. Jewish people are condescendingly and racially dismissive of Palestinians as narratives of their own decolonial struggle and insist instead upon perpetual Jewish innocence as a people who are woefully out of touch with both humanity and reality. The fact that virtually all Jews in Jewish spaces are Zionist and support the existence of Israel is an indictment of us as a morally bankrupt people. Zero Jews could support Palestine, it would only further condemn us. Certainly not those under the boot of our fascist reign, constantly developing resurgent ways to persist and resist our sadistic butchering. Jewish thoughts and feelings about Palestine do not matter, or rather they should not matter. Jewish feelings are currently given far too much weight as the world grinds to a halt for white Jewish feelings in particular. Jewish university staff and students are currently receiving massive payouts for so-called anti-Semitism claims after the blessed Al-Aqsa flood operation, 21 million class settlement payout at Columbia, which we covered, did we not?
We did.
Compare this to how the hammer comes down on Arabs and Muslims experience actual systemic targeting, attacks, and abuse. Palestine is a generational freedom struggle, not a weepy Jewish grief circle. Palestine doesn't need Jewish co-signing to get free. Jews need to get serious, get out of Palestine, and rid Judaism of fascistic Zionism. Of our own volition, Jewish people crowned Zionism a central pillar of modern Judaism and fashioned Israel into our new God, a hyper-militarized golden calf for an increasingly faithless people, seeking a seat in the world of the above. White supremacy, settlerhood, nation-building, power within Euro-American empire, so and so forth. We seamlessly integrated Israel and Zionism into every facet of Jewish life globally. Zionism has no borders. Israel has not become fascistic vis-a-vis Netanyahu and the Likud party. Rather, Israel is innately fascistic because of its settler colonial structure. Same applies to Trump and the American crusading settler colony. Israel's blueprint, as Dr. Muhammad Abdu articulates in Islam and Anarchism, America and Israel are both irreformable and irredeemable. Built out of the world established in 1492, entities erected by genocidal settlers atop mass indigenous graves. Almost half of the global Jewish population, 46%, are Israeli settler squatters. They overwhelmingly support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, 82%, and the current U.S.-Israel war on Iran, 93%. Most of the rest of us live as privileged white settlers in colonies like so-called America, 41% of Jews. Those of us living in settler colonies outside of Israel also neglected our responsibilities as settlers towards indigenous land back and black self-determination movements where we are. On Turtle Island, black and indigenous genocides have persisted for 533 years and counting. When I state that virtually all Jews and Jewish formations are Zionists, I am including most of the very small number of Jews and Jewish organizers who self-identify as anti-Zionist or pro-Palestine. Scratch the surface and you'll find quickly that most are liberal Zionists, as Laura Killarney and the team at Good Shepherd Collective frequently note. All Jews who claim non-Zionism are Zionist in their politics because they always disparage the resistance and conflate colonizer with colonized. Example, we condemn both violence by Hamas and violence by Israel, a coexistent future on the land for both Palestine and Israeli Jews. Right? Both siding the issue. We've talked about that ad nauseum as well. Genuine Jewish anti-Zionists unwaveringly support the total eradication of Israel and the greater Satan America, full land back without a speck of Zionist or Euro-American imperial settler colonial control. This includes Jews supporting removing fellow Jews from Palestine while ensuring they don't do harm where they go further displace indigenous peoples elsewhere. and open, reverent support for Palestine's armed resistance. Gaza's Mujahideen are at the heart of the struggle, currently spearheaded by Hamas al-Qassam brigades, who executed the miraculous Alaska Flood on October 7th, an operation that genuine Jewish anti-Zionists unequivocally recognize as one of the most prolific anti-colonial operations in history. It is exceedingly rare to find these political commitments amongst Jews, and still weak when found, as we have accomplished virtually nothing material or meaningful to stop our people from committing the most heinous and disgusting acts imaginable. Over the last century in occupied Palestine, Jewish people are currently raping Palestinians to death with hot metal rods in concentration camp prisons, and Jewish so-called allies living cozy lives in the imperial core still have the audacity to moan on about anti-Semitism and don't blame Jews for the action of Israel. This Zionist nightmare is our moral responsibility as Jews to reckon with and war against within our own ranks. Yes, all Jews. While self-identification with the term Zionist has fallen out of favor as of late, support for the existence of Israel among Jewish people is still rock solid. As people of the world increasingly turn against Israel, having seen Zionism for the evil it is, Jewish people have not budged on the fascistic commitments. Do you see heated confrontations over Jewish genocide breaking out at synagogues across the world? Do you see riots of internal strife inside? Jewish community and religious spaces that sell stolen Palestinian land and host IOF terrorists to speak and fundraise? No, of course not. Jews' nose is expected to support Israel at all shoals. This is considered normal Jewish life, our birthright in a world that perpetually hates us for no other reason than that we're Jewish. Our delusions of Jewish innocence, our grandiose self-importance, our entitled death grip on the colony goes virtually uncontested within the Jewish community. Jewish Zionists see Palestine and align with Jews because they're Jews. Jewish anti-Zionists see Palestine and align with Palestinians because they are the sacred below being crushed by the above, the salt of the earth fighting for dignity and liberation on their own land, on their own terms. The land indeed fights with them. We don't waver or flinch on our positions because it's fellow Jewish people who are the fascists, running children over alive with tanks. Anti-Zionist commitments are ethical, not identitarian. Jewish people may differ on the Netanyahu government policies, who should lead the Zionist entity, West Bank settlements, and the like, but once you assert support for Hamas, for removing Jews from Palestine, and promote the dissolution of Israel in its entirety, you are considered by Jews to be a traitor to the Jewish community. Jews with more moral clarity lack the courage, the spine, the organization, the faith, the embodied principles, and the will to force Zionism out of Judaism. The Jews who also hate Israel and what it has wrought, be proud when they call you a traitor to their death project. Let us be traitors unflinchingly. Thoughts so far, Care Bear?
I mean, it's very damning what she said, but in a good way.
Yeah.
I think in terms of it's very hard. Well, as a person who was in a religious space for many years, grew up in it, and then evolved out of it, you know, I get like, well, here's what I'll say. I think a lot of the behavior, and I kind of said in the last segment, a lot of the behavior that we see and I can make this argument within the Christian space as well. But I think what's unique, in terms of, religion in the West is given, like, again, it's the Enlightenment stance. Like, I think, therefore I am. So it's almost like this individualistic, almost entitlement that you have in, like, I'm the only one that matters, essentially. So, like, whatever. Now the thing is with religion, whatever religion, if you believe in, is meant to empower you to be able to serve others. But I think especially living in the West, that's almost kind of, you help others, but in terms of what would you get out of it? And it's not the idea of like doing it for the benefit of humanity. It's the idea of like, I do it because either like I can get something out of it tangibly, or especially if in the Black church, the idea that one day after I'm dead and gone, all of my good deeds would compound into something beautiful in my next life.
Right.
Like, and so for me, it's the idea, and this is kind of what I saw in church a lot, and this is kind of what I confronted with. It's how genuine you are in your faith, that you care about humanity. Like for me, as a teacher, I don't think you could be a good teacher if you don't think about the issues of universality every day. Like, what I mean is, especially looking at my kids who are somewhat, not somewhat, are privileged for the most part. It's the idea of like, how is it that like there are certain children in our communities that do not eat, that do not have a decent home to go home to, that are not clothed well, that, you know, may not have a home structure that helps them feel safe and their most authentic self. Like, these are the things that I think about constantly, given my job, which I think also kind of affects my politics as well. So for me, I find it very hard, especially being if you're coming from a religious standpoint, regardless of what it is, that you're not necessarily thinking of that in that framework, like in terms of your faith. And the idea that, again, due to isolationism, exceptionalism, I think in the West in particular, and again, I'll make this case for Christians as well, but since we're talking about Judaism, I'm going to call out the Jews, like how you can have your head down in the name of faith. And people seemingly now conflate your faith with carnage. Like, that I do not understand. Yeah, it took me a while to get there, but I think for me, it's like, if you're supposed to be people of peace, allegedly, why are you allowing this to go on?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you more people speaking out against this? And I know Indy says this a lot to us privately. Like, you know, there are people who might believe like in the way that we do, but they're too afraid to, or they feel like they're being ostracized or whatever. And I heard someone say, like, if your religion doesn't allow you to critically think, or, and I know especially for you being an FES, you had to deal with that. But
Yeah.
like, if they're not allowing you to critically think and openly without judgment, it's a fucking cult.
As many of them are.
Right.
Which
So
I think, like,
this is,
I mean, not to get too off the topic, but like the history of religions in general, regardless of where they come from, follow that same, like, there's a lack of understanding. Let's make some stuff up so that we understand it. Plus, lots of amounts of psychedelics usually involved, you know, to get there. But which you get into things like ayahuasca gods and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just used very similarly. But it's always like, once it becomes this big organized thing, it's like you really don't have any control of, like, it's then become top down, right? You know?
Right. But that, yeah, but it's the idea, but I get it. It's the idea of like, and I think a lot of it is due to what people are missing in life, like community and like
Yeah.
acceptance. Which look, I totally get. I understand the appeal, but where's the line being drawn if your community is causing harm to another? Like,
Yeah.
to me, that shouldn't be. Like, the idea of Christianity, at least to me, has always been you shouldn't isolate yourself. Like, and I think that's kind of the problem, especially in a lot of these evangelical spaces. It's just kind of like they isolate themselves. Like, it's just this exclusive club. Like, and everyone else is kind of like the heathen. We shouldn't be engaging with them. And like,
Right.
we can point and judge them, which was very much against what Jesus did.
Uh-huh.
Like, when, if you believe in that, like, he engaged in the least of these. The very people that people would tell in that day would be like, no, you don't hang out with them. They're like, you can fill in the blank of how they are. And I kind of
Right.
see that with Jews too. It's like, except like it's Arabs. Like,
Yep.
it's like those people, like, who are brown, like, they're the savages. And we need to
Literal
go over
Philistines.
there and
That's
and we
the
need to be in those areas to defang them in order to make them more civilized, or we'll just no, actually it's not even that. It's just no, we're just gonna get rid of them. Like, they're a hindrance to us as far as the progress we want to make in this
Which
land
is-
that was given to us via the Torah. Like,
yeah.
like I don't understand why people can be so the complicity in that.
Right.
Like, and then just gymnastics to try and justify what's going on. But again, I say that.
Yeah.
I say that for Jews, but I say that for Christians probably more so because that's kind of where I see a lot
Your
of this, but just kind of
background
the
is.
similarities are. Yeah.
Well, I feel like they are saying so. Like, there's this thing of like, don't conflate Judaism with Zionism, and this article is essentially saying like they've not earned that yet. Like, the religion's
Right.
still very part of this, like, and has not, as a whole, even in a small grouping, there's maybe 10-15% of them that have even been vocal, and that's
Right.
being incredibly generous.
Right, but I think mostly for me, just if you want to look at it from biblical/religious standpoint, if you look at the Old Testament, like, the idea of the land wasn't not in the people. Was not in the land per se.
Right.
It was the people. Like, it was the idea that God chose a people to be a light
Yeah.
to other nations. It didn't mean hell. Like, again, if you looked at the old shit, the Israelites fucked up all the time. That God had to be like, you gotta go. Like, to punish you, I'm gonna ostracize you. You're gonna live in other places. You're gonna live in exile, and like, but he was always with, like, he was
Right.
always with. It was the people that he was trying to develop. It was never about the land. So
So
it's like, but now it's like it's become. But now, through Zionism, that idea has shifted to no, it is about this land because we've never been safe, and like, we've had to go through all of this for our history, and this is what God promised us because, yeah, we did some bad things, but we're basically good little boys and girls now that we deserve it, and God gave it to us, and that's it. And it's like, fine if you choose to believe that. But again, that shouldn't come at the cost of other lives who have been there, who have been in the region, I'll argue, longer than you.
yeah. So coming back to this article, which I have skipped some for time. Links are to the full article is in the description. They go into more in depth in some things, but they finish up With as journalist Laith Marouf often remarks, the loudest Jewish voice today is genocide. He rightly advocates for Jews to battle against Zionism within our own communities and to sacrifice beyond polemics in a material way like Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims have since the inception of Zionism. They have lost generations and entire family lineages as they throw sand in the gears of Zionism's unending death machine. Laith Marouf notes how there is no meaningful resistance from anti-Zionist Jews fighting Jewish Zionism like there was, for instance, amongst anti-fascist Germans fighting Nazism. He asks for our consideration, where is this Jewish John Brown? Where is the Jewish Oscar Schindler? And remarks upon how in over a century the Zionist project, not one Jewish person has died for the cause of Palestinian liberation, so why should Laith or any other Palestinian be expected to not conflate Judaism and Zionism when we as Jews don't care enough to fight and sacrifice for the separation ourselves? They shouldn't. Palestinians owe us nothing. We owe Palestine an infinite, unpayable debt that continues to rack up every single moment of every single day. So here are Laith's tweets. 100 years of Zionism and not one Jewish Oscar Schindler, right? The day one Jew, and we really mean just one, shuts their mouth and carries arms against Zionism to liberate Judaism or to defend those oppressed in their name, a la John Brown, we will then differentiate between Zionism and Judaism. In the meanwhile, and for the past 100 years, there is no difference. So, but yeah, I'll link to the article below, but I wanted to catch Laith Marouf read the article and said it is good to see finally one Jew quote my writings and echo them all through the article, and not to attack or ostracize me, but to elevate their ideas to their rightful place as the cutting edge of revolutionary thought, although the quotes regrettably came at the end of the article, maybe for fear other Jews would not read through. It is stated with quotes from me. Also, Age Linder next is to call to arms for Jews against Zionism taking over and occupying temples and institutions, holding trials for Jewish war criminals and forming militias, as he said. If Jews don't take those actions, others will. In any case, maybe now that my ideas have gained more legitimacy by Jewish adjacency, do you think this would mean the Western-based pundit class would stop blacklisting me and Free Palestine TV? I'm a go with no on that one, Laith. I'm a bet not. I think you're still gonna be ostracized, dog. No offense. You know, not from us. We read you here frequently, so you know, whatever. And we read all the way to the bit that had you in it. Funny how we do that. We tend to read the whole thing here. It's amazing what happens when you read the whole thing. Funny how that works. But anyway, any thoughts before we head out?
Jews, get yourselves together. Honestly, like,
right.
I mean, I don't want to sound like as simple as that, but it's like, you know, like the world hates you. The world hates, and it shouldn't be that way. It's like,
No.
yeah, people shouldn't conflate what's happening in Israel with the religion in of itself, but not all of you, but many of you have made it a point to make it a thing.
Yeah.
But now so you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, Zionism is Judaism, but then it's like, but people hate you, then it's like, oh, you can't hate us because of, you know, like,
Yeah.
the victim playbook. You know, it's like, no, if you believe that, own that. You know,
Yeah.
some do. But I'm talking about like the regular schmegular folk who might believe that. But then it's like, again, are you willing to bear that cost? Again, why? It's like, is that piece of, like, you don't even live there. Most of you. That's the thing. It's like, it'd be one thing if you were to live there permanently, but yeah, the moment that that country has bombed you out, many
Right.
of you, like, so you can't even commit to living there like permanently. Like, like most people in the world, depending where they live, can't do that. So yeah, it's just, but, and to be fair, we know some people who do resist, but there should be a more louder state, because again, it's not necessarily, it's not all Jews, it's the ones in power, but the ones that are not, and I think that's, again, if we were to kind of summarize this episode, is the idea of who has the power, like, and how can we take that power back so that people are liberated. So it's the elites who kind of conflated Zionism with Judaism, and they've have control over it, that stance, and somehow, in my opinion, Jews have just kind of gone along with it. Like,
Yep.
and it's like, what's the stand you're going to make, especially given, look, if you don't care about Palestinians, I mean, I think you suck, but like, whatever. But like, how is this going to be good for you?
Right.
In terms of you being marked essentially as, I mean, in this way, a terrorist.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if for me, definitely, I could not live with myself in that. And I would fight against that. Like, so yeah, it's the idea of like, if you want your religion to be somewhat known for greatness in the right way, and not being like a death cult, you need to do something about that with your neighbors and figure it out.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Well, interesting article for sure. Brought up some interesting discussion, I think. But talking about that is certainly why YouTube is going to shadow ban that clip, as well as our entire channel. So if you want to get around their system and help keep us, in the black, go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, or scan that QR code on your screen and give us a little donation. We appreciate the monetary assistance. But like, subscribe, share the video, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about it. Otherwise, thanks for watching. We did it. We did it. Well, I am not sure what's coming up this week. Me and Indy just did our 200th episode of boats smashing into other boats, so go check that out. That was a fun time. It's over on the Rumble, which links to all our channels are in the description, as always. I'm not sure if Indy's doing a thing tomorrow, but
It's Passover.
yeah, it would be the case, wouldn't it? And spring break's coming up for them too, so that's going to be interesting to figure out with kids. But look, Get Any News at Get Any News on Twitter will always update you at least that day, as well as on Substack. You're welcome to follow us on there. I think we even have on our website, there's a calendar, I think, somewhere. So if you look for that, you can find it. But otherwise, same bat channel, same bat time next week. So
yes,
look forward to it. Well, it's that time, kids. Collin, anything you want to tell people before we head out?
Thank you for watching. We love you.
Yeah.
And I'm tired.
Me too.
I gotta go to bed.
Remember, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Have peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.